Our family's year-end party. My sister announced her pregnancy with my husband. Expecting me to collapse, we're a family now, she sneered. I stayed silent, raised a toast, and revealed a shocking truth suddenly. Their world shattered. At our family annual lavish year-end party, my sister Jasmine stood up and placed a hand on her stomach, expecting me to collapse when she announced she was pregnant with my husband. We are a family now, she sneered, while my mother applauded what she called God's will. I stayed silent, raised a toast, and revealed a shocking truth that would leave them homeless in the snow within the hour. Suddenly their world shattered, and the real game began. My name is Dominique Sterling, and at 34 years old, I thought I had curated the perfect life. I am a senior art appraiser for one of the most prestigious auction houses in Chicago. My job is to distinguish between a masterwork and a forgery, to look past the surface paint and see the cracks in the canvas. I thought I was an expert at spotting fakes, but as I stood in the center of my penthouse living room watching the snow fall over Lake Michigan, I realized the biggest frauds in my life were the people holding crystal flutes of my vintage champagne. Before I tell you how I dismantled my husband and sister piece by piece, because mine certainly did that night. The evening started with the deceptively warm glow of the fireplace. My penthouse on the 42nd floor was filled with the soft hum of jazz and the scent of roasted duck and expensive perfume. I had invited my entire family over to celebrate the end of a record-breaking financial year for me. My husband Tyrell was wearing a custom tuxedo I had paid for, acting the part of the doting spouse. He was a life coach, which was a polite way of saying he spent his days at the gym and his evenings spending my money. My younger sister Jasmine was there too, wearing a silk red dress that looked suspiciously like one missing from my closet. She sat next to Tyrell on the velvet sofa, giggling a little too loudly at his jokes. The clock on the mantel was ticking toward midnight, but the explosion happened at 11:45. Jasmine picked up a silver spoon and tapped it against her glass. The sharp, ringing sound cut through the conversation. My mother Bernice, who was sitting in the armchair like a queen on a throne, hushed everyone. "Attention everyone," Jasmine said, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and malice. "I have a special announcement, the best gift of the year." I stood by the kitchen island swirling my wine, expecting her to announce a new job, or perhaps another business venture she would need me to fund. Instead, she stood up and placed her hand protectively over her stomach. She looked directly at me, her eyes gleaming with a twisted sense of triumph. "Tyrell and I are expecting a baby," she said. The silence that followed was so heavy, it felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. I froze. The glass in my hand didn't shake, but my heart stopped. I looked at Tyrell, my husband of 7 years. The man who had held me while I cried over 2 miscarriages. The man who told me he was willing to wait until God blessed us. He didn't look ashamed, he didn't look down at the floor. He stood up and wrapped his arm around my sister's waist, pulling her close. "We know this is a shock," Tyrell said, his voice smooth and practiced the same tone he used on his clients. "But love does not follow a schedule, Dominique. You have been so busy with the auction house, traveling to London and Paris chasing your career. Jasmine was there, she understands me. We did not plan this, but a child is a blessing." I felt a wave of nausea, but I forced it down. I looked at my sister, my little sister whom I had tutored through college, who I had bailed out of debt 3 times. She smirked. "We are a family now, Dominique," she said. "I hope you can be happy for us. You always wanted a niece or nephew, right? Now you will have one, and Tyrell will finally be a father." I waited for the outrage. I waited for my mother Bernice, a deaconess in her church, to stand up and condemn this adultery. I waited for her to slap Tyrell or scream at Jasmine, but the betrayal went deeper than I could have imagined. My mother set her plate down and clapped her hands together. Her face was beaming with joy. "Praise the Lord," Bernice shouted. "Oh, this is a miracle." She stood up and rushed over to hug Jasmine and Tyrell, ignoring me completely. She kissed Jasmine's cheek and patted Tyrell on the back. "I have been praying for this," she said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "I have been praying for the Sterling line to continue. Dominique, you know you have had your struggles in that department. Maybe this is God's way of solving the problem." I finally found my voice. It came out lower than usual, icy and sharp. "God's way," I repeated. "Mother, your daughter is sleeping with your son-in-law. Tyrell is still married to me. This is not a miracle. This is adultery." Bernice waved her hand dismissively as if I were a buzzing fly. Do not use those legal terms with me, Dominique, she snapped. The Bible says, be fruitful and multiply. You have been barren for 7 years. You chose your career over your duty as a wife. Tyrell has needs. He is a man. If Jasmine can give him what you cannot, then, you should be grateful. We can keep this in the family. She stepped toward me, her expression hardening. Now here's what is going to happen. You have plenty of room in this penthouse, 4 bedrooms, and it is just you. Jasmine needs a stable environment for the baby. You will move into the guest wing. Let Tyrell and Jasmine have the master suite. They need the space for the nursery. You can be the godmother. You can help raise this child. It takes a village, Dominique. Do not be selfish. Selfish. The word hung in the air. I looked around the room, my luxury furniture, my art collection, my food they were eating, my wine they were drinking, and they were calling me selfish for not handing over my husband and my bedroom to my sister. Tyrell stepped forward, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked at me with a pitying expression that made my blood boil. Your mother is right, Dom, he said. Look at you. You are cold. You are always analyzing things like they are business deals. Jasmine is warm. She is soft. We do not want to kick you out of your own life. We just want you to step aside and let the real family take over. You can still pay the mortgage, of course. Think of it as your contribution, since you cannot contribute a child. I looked at Ethan, my brother-in-law, who was sitting in the corner. He was Jasmine's fiancé, or at least he was until 5 minutes ago. He was white, a quiet architect, who had built his own firm from the ground up. He looked pale as a ghost, staring at Jasmine with horror. He was the only other person in the room who seemed to understand the insanity of what was happening. But he was too in shock to speak. I, on the other hand, was done being in shock. My appraiser's eye kicked in. I looked at Tyrell. I looked at the fake love in his eyes. I looked at the cheap ambition in Jasmine's smile. I looked at the hypocritical piety of my mother. They were all forgeries, cheap knockoffs of human beings trying to pass themselves off as family. And I knew exactly how to handle trash. You dispose of it. I took a slow sip of my wine. The vintage was excellent. A Cabernet I had saved for a special occasion. I suppose the end of my marriage was special enough. I set the glass down on the marble island with a deliberate click. You are right, I said softly. Tyrell smiled smugly. He thought he had won. He thought I was the doormat he had been walking on for 7 years. I have been cold. I continued walking slowly toward him. I have been focused on assets and value. So let us talk about value, Tyrell. I reached out and took his left wrist. He thought I was going to hold his hand. Instead, I focused on the heavy gold watch on his wrist. A Rolex Daytona. Beautiful watch, I said. Tyrell puffed out his chest. Yeah, you have good taste, Dom. Thanks for the gift. I looked him in the eye. Actually, I haven't given it to you yet. His smile faltered. What? I bought this for your birthday next week, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I left it in the safe. You must have taken the combination from my notebook. That is theft, Tyrell. But more importantly, the warranty does not activate until I sign the transfer of ownership card, which I have not done. I unclasped the watch. He was too stunned to pull away. I slid the heavy gold timepiece off his wrist. And since you are now a father-to-be, you will need to save money. You cannot afford a $40,000 watch on a life coach's salary. I turned and dropped the Rolex into my glass of red wine. It splashed dark liquid onto the white tablecloth. Dom, what are you doing? Tyrell shouted, reaching for the glass. I picked up the glass and smashed it onto the floor. The wine and the watch skidded across the hardwood. I am liquidating my assets, I said. Then I pulled my phone from my pocket. I did not call the police. I called the number I had on speed dial, the private security firm that managed my building. Hello, this is Dominique Sterling in Penthouse 4A. I have intruders in my apartment. 3 of them. Yes, they are becoming aggressive. Please send the tactical team. Immediate removal. Jasmine laughed nervously. You are joking. You cannot kick us out. Mom, tell her she cannot kick us out. This is a family party. Bernice stepped forward, her face turning red. Dom, stop this foolishness right now. You are embarrassing us. You are going to call security on your own mother. On a pregnant woman. Have you no shame? You are acting like a bitter old spinster. Apologize to your sister and go set up the guest room. I checked my own watch. A Patek Philippe that I had bought with my own bonus. You have about 3 minutes before the elevator doors open, I said calmly. If I were you, I would start grabbing your coats. It is 10 degrees below zero outside, and I do not think the homeless shelters accept reservations this late at night. Tyrell grabbed my arm. His grip was painful. You can't do this, Dominique. I am your husband. I have rights. This is my home too. I looked at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. Actually, Tyrell, I bought this apartment 2 years before we married. Your name is not on the deed. Your name is not on the mortgage. And thanks to the prenup you signed, because you were so sure you would never cheat. Your name will never be on the deed. As for rights, the only right you have is to remain silent while you get the hell out of my sight. The elevator dinged. The heavy steel doors slid open, and 4 security guards in tactical gear stepped out. They were not the friendly doormen downstairs. These were the men I paid to protect my art collection. They were large-armed, and they did not care about family drama. Miss Sterling, the lead guard asked, stepping into the foyer. Remove them, I said, pointing at my family. They are trespassing. If they resist, arrest them. Tyrell tried to puff up his chest again. Now wait a minute, man. This is a domestic dispute. I am her husband. The guard did not blink. Sir, Miss Sterling is the sole leaseholder. You have been asked to leave. You can walk out, or you can be dragged out. Jasmine started to cry. Real tears this time. But Dom, my coat is in the bedroom. My purse. I need my things. I signaled to the guard. He blocked her path to the bedroom. We will mail your things to whatever motel you end up in, I said. Bernice screamed. You are sending your pregnant sister out into the blizzard. You are demonic, Dominique. I disown you. You hear me. You are no daughter of mine. I walked over to the door and held it open for them. The cold air from the hallway rushed in. You disowned me the moment you clapped for my husband getting my sister pregnant, I said. Goodbye, mother. Don't slip on the ice. The guards moved in. It wasn't graceful. Tyrell tried to argue, and got shoved toward the elevator. Jasmine was wailing, clutching her stomach theatrically. But the guards simply escorted her firmly by the elbow. Bernice was shouting Bible verses at me, calling down fire and brimstone. But she moved quickly enough when the guard put a hand on her shoulder. I watched them pile into the elevator. Tyrell, the man I loved. Jasmine, the sister I protected. Bernice, the mother I worshipped. They looked back at me with hatred, with shock, with absolute disbelief that the Bank of Dominique had finally closed its doors. As the doors began to close, Tyrell shouted, You will regret this. You will die alone, Dominique. I didn't answer. I just stood there in my silk blouse, holding my ground as the doors shut, cutting off their noise. The silence returned to the penthouse. It was beautiful. I turned around. Ethan was still sitting in the corner, holding his drink, his knuckles white. He looked up at me, terrified that he was next. I walked over to him. I poured myself a fresh glass of wine from a new bottle. I sat down opposite him. Drink up, Ethan, I said, my voice steady. The trash is gone. Now the real work begins. I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. I had joint accounts with Tyrell, accounts I funded, accounts he used. I tapped the screen. Freeze. Freeze. Then I opened my email and composed a message to my lawyer, Evelyn Vance, subject urgent. Initiate the scorched earth protocol. I looked at Ethan. Are you ready to stop crying and start fighting? I asked him. Ethan wiped his face. His eyes were red, but for the first time I saw a spark of anger in them. What do we do? He asked, his voice hoarse. I smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who just spotted prey. We are going to ruin them, Ethan. We are going to take everything. But first, tell me something. When exactly did you find out she was sleeping with him? Ethan took a deep breath. And what he told me next made me realize that tonight's party was just the tip of the iceberg. The betrayal was not just emotional. It was financial criminal, and it had been going on for years. The snow swirled outside my window covering the city in white, but inside my heart was turning black. They wanted a family. I would give them a war. The silence in my penthouse did not last long. 10 minutes after the elevator doors closed on my screaming family, my phone began to vibrate against the marble countertop. It started as a low hum, a single notification, but within seconds, it transformed into a relentless buzzing that rattled the expensive crystal nearby. I picked it up. My hands steady, despite the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. It was an Instagram notification, then a Facebook tag, then a deluge of direct messages. I unlocked the screen and there they were. Jasmine and Tyrell were live streaming. I tapped the screen. The video quality was grainy, likely shot from the lobby of a nearby hotel, but the audio was crystal clear. Jasmine was huddled in a corner wrapped in her oversized coat, shivering theatrically. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in perfect tragic streaks. Tyrell had his arm around her, looking into the camera with the eyes of a wounded protector. The viewer count was climbing by the second. 500, 1,000, 5,000. We do not know where we are going to sleep tonight. Jasmine sobbed, clutching her stomach. My sister. My own sister just threw us out. She knows I am pregnant. She knows it is -10 degrees outside. She just does not care. She has this huge apartment, all this money, and she threw us out like garbage because she is jealous. Tyrell leaned into the frame, his jaw clenched. She is heartless, guys. I tried to reason with her. I told her, Dominique, this is your blood. This is a baby. But she looked at me and laughed. She said she cares more about her expensive rugs than her own family. We just want everyone to know the truth about the successful Dominique Sterling. She might be a big shot in the art world, but inside, she is ice cold. I scrolled down to the comments. They were scrolling so fast it was hard to read them all, but the sentiment was unanimous. Example 1. What a monster. Who does that to a pregnant woman? Example 2. Rich people are disgusting. Boy caught her business. Example 3. I hope karma comes for her. She deserves to be alone. I felt a cold tightness in my chest. It wasn't sadness. It was the realization of how quickly the narrative could be weaponized. Jasmine had always been good at this. The damsel in distress, the victim. And I, the successful stoic older sister, was the perfect villain for her story. She was leveraging her pregnancy and my wealth to paint a picture of Dickensian cruelty, conveniently leaving out the part where she was sleeping with my husband. I turned off the phone and poured the rest of the wine down the sink. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my office chair, watching the sun rise over the frozen lake, formulating my defense. I knew that in the court of public opinion, facts rarely mattered as much as feelings. And right now, everyone was feeling sorry for the pregnant girl in the snow. The real damage became apparent the next morning when I walked into the auction house. Usually my arrival was met with respectful nods and the quiet rustle of productivity. Today there was a sudden sharp silence. The receptionist, a young girl named Sarah, who usually greeted me with a bright smile, looked down at her desk, her face flushing red. "Good morning, Sarah," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "Good morning, Miss Sterling," she mumbled, not meeting my eyes. I walked toward my office, feeling the weight of stares on my back. I could hear the whispers. The video had gone viral locally. In Chicago's tight-knit high society, gossip traveled faster than light. I had barely sat down at my desk when my intercom buzzed. It was my boss, Mr. Henderson. "Dominique, could you come to my office now?" His tone was not a request. I smoothed my skirt, grabbed my tablet, and walked down the hall. Henderson was a man who cared about two things: the bottom line and discretion. I had just threatened both. He did not offer me a seat. He was standing by the window looking out at the city, holding a printout of a tweet. "We have a problem, Dominique," he said, turning to face me. "The Grandmaster painting, the Vanderwoods estate. They called this morning." I felt a pit form in my stomach. That was a $10 million consignment, my biggest deal of the quarter. "They are pulling the piece," he said flatly. Why, I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because Mrs. Vanderwoodson saw a video of you throwing a pregnant woman into a blizzard," he said, tossing the paper onto his desk. "She says she does not want her family's legacy associated with domestic instability. That is the polite term she used. The impolite term was scandalous drama. I kept my face neutral. Sir, that video is a fabrication of context. My sister and husband committed adultery. I removed them from my property. It is a private matter. It is a public matter now, Henderson snapped. We are in the business of trust, Dominique. People trust us with their most valuable possessions. If they think you are volatile, if they think you are cruel, they will take their business to Christie's. Fix this. I do not care how. Get off social media, settle with your family, make it go away. If I lose another client, it will be your resignation letter on this desk. I walked out of his office with my head high, but inside, I was shaking with rage. Jasmine and Tyrell were not just hurting my feelings anymore, they were attacking my livelihood. They were messing with my money, and that was an act of war. I spent the rest of the day in damage control mode. I instructed my team to block comments on our professional pages. I drafted emails to key clients, assuring them of my full attention, avoiding any mention of the personal chaos. By the time I left the office at 7 p.m., I was exhausted, not physically, but spiritually. I arrived back at my building, the doorman giving me a sympathetic but wary look. I took the private elevator up, craving the silence I had fought so hard for. But the silence was broken as soon as the doors opened. Sitting on the floor of my hallway right outside my penthouse door was a figure slumped against the wall. He was wearing a wrinkled coat, his hair was a mess, and he smelled strongly of cheap whiskey. It was Ethan. My brother-in-law looked up as I approached. His eyes were bloodshot swollen, almost shut. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. Dom, he slurred, trying to stand up and failing. They are at the Hilton. I saw the post. They are at the Hilton using your credit card probably. Or maybe mine. I don't know anymore. Get up, Ethan, I said, unlocking the door. You are making a scene in the hallway. He stumbled after me into the apartment. He looked around the empty living room, the spot where the confrontation had happened 24 hours ago. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She told me she loved me, Dom, he whispered, collapsing onto the sofa I had forbidden anyone to sit on with outside clothes. Just yesterday morning, she looked me in the eye and said she couldn't wait to marry me. We picked out nursery colors. Yellow. She wanted yellow because she said it was happy. He put his head in his hands and began to weep. It wasn't a quiet cry. It was the ugly guttural sobbing of a man whose reality had just shattered. I stood there watching him. Part of me wanted to comfort him. He was a victim in this just like me. He was a good man, a successful architect kind to a fault. He didn't deserve this. But comfort was not what we needed right now. Comfort was soft. Comfort was weak. And we were under siege. I walked over to the wet bar, poured a glass of ice water, and walked back to him. Ethan, I said sharply. He didn't look up. Why, Dom? Why did she do it? Was I not enough? I gave her everything. I designed her dream house. First, I threw the water in his face. The shock made him gasp, sputtering as the freezing liquid hit his skin. He sat up, blinking rapidly, water dripping from his chin onto his expensive wool coat. What the hell, Dominique, he shouted. I slammed the empty glass down on the coffee table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Stop it, I hissed, leaning down so my face was inches from his. Stop asking why. Why does a parasite feed on a host? Because it is hungry, and it does not care if the host dies. Jasmine does not love you. She does not love Tyrell. She loves security. She loves money. And right now you are sitting here crying over a woman who is currently laughing in a hotel room, spending your money carrying a baby that she lied to your face about. Ethan wiped the water from his eyes, staring at me. He looked shocked, hurt. But he was listening. You are asking the wrong questions. I continued, my voice low and dangerous. You are asking what you did wrong. You should be asking how you are going to make them pay. Look at me. He looked at me. My husband and your fiancé just humiliated us in front of the world. I lost a $10 million deal today because of their little performance. They are winning, Ethan. As long as you sit here crying into my sofa, they are winning. They think we are weak. They think I am a cold witch, and you are a pathetic loser who will eventually forgive them. I stood up straight, crossing my arms. So I have a question for you. Are you the man who built a skyscraper in downtown Chicago from a single blueprint? Or are you just a wallet for my sister to steal from? Ethan stared at the floor. The water dripped from his nose. His hands were shaking, but slowly he clenched them into fists. He took a deep, shuddering breath. The air in the room seemed to shift. The smell of whiskey was still there, but the smell of despair was fading, replaced by something sharper, anger. He stood up. He was taller than Tyrell, with broad shoulders that were usually slumped in kindness, but now squared with a new resolve. He wiped his face with his sleeve. She used the company card, he said quietly. What I asked? Jasmine, he said, his voice steadier. She has access to my firm's expense account for wedding planning. I got a notification an hour ago. She withdrew $5,000 cash at an ATM near the Hilton. I smiled. It was a small, cold smile. Now we were getting somewhere. That is embezzlement, Ethan, I said softly. That is a felony. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the architect in him. The man who understood structure and how to dismantle it. She thinks I am stupid, he said. She thinks I am just the nice guy who pays the bills. I walked over to my desk and pulled out a notepad. Nice guys finish last, Ethan. Tonight we are not nice. Tonight we become the villains they claim we are. Go wash your face. Use the guest bathroom. There is a fresh shirt in the closet that I bought for Tyrell but never gave him. Put it on. He nodded, turning toward the hallway. He paused at the door. Dom? Yes. Thank you for the water. I nodded. Don't mention it. Now, hurry up. We have a forensic audit to conduct before the banks open tomorrow morning. As Ethan walked away, I looked back at my phone. The notifications were still rolling and the hateful comments piling up like snowdrifts. But they didn't sting anymore. I looked at the screen at Jasmine's tear-stained face frozen in the thumbnail. Cry while you can, little sister. I whispered to the empty room, because when I am done with you, you won't have enough tears left to fill a thimble. I sat down at my computer and opened a new file. I named it simply The Eviction. But this wasn't about the apartment anymore. It was about evicting them from our lives, from our finances, and from any hope of a future. The game was on. The manila envelope that landed on my mahogany desk was thick, heavy, and smelled faintly of cheap cologne. It was delivered not by a professional courier, but by a teenager in a pizza delivery uniform, who looked confused to be standing in the pristine lobby of Sterling Auction House. I tipped him $5 and slit the envelope open with my silver letter opener. Inside was a lawsuit. I had expected this. I knew Tyrell would not go quietly into the night, especially not when the temperature outside was still hovering around 0. But reading the actual words on the legal paper made my blood boil in a way I had not anticipated. It was a petition for divorce filed by the law offices of Saul Goodman knockoff named Gary Salos, a man whose billboards I had seen on the side of the highway, usually advertising injury settlements for slip-and-fall accidents. Tyrell had hired a strip mall lawyer to sue me. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the demands. They were laughable, yet infuriating. Item 1. Tyrell requested 50% of all marital assets including the penthouse, my art collection, and my retirement accounts. Item 2. Tyrell requested monthly spousal support in the amount of $15,000. And then came the paragraph that made me laugh out loud in my empty office. The petitioner, Mr. Tyrell Sterling, alleges that he sacrificed a promising professional basketball career to support the respondent's demanding schedule as an art appraiser. This sacrifice has caused him significant emotional distress and loss of future earnings. I leaned back in my chair staring at the ceiling. A promising basketball career. Tyrell had played one season at a community college before tearing his ACL during a pickup game at the YMCA, because he tried to dunk on a teenager and landed wrong. He had spent the last 7 years living off my income, driving cars I leased, and calling himself a life coach while his only client was himself. And now he wanted me to pay him for the privilege of having been a parasite. I picked up my phone and dialed Evelyn Vance. Evelyn was not a strip mall lawyer. She was a shark in a Chanel suit, the kind of attorney who made grown men cry in depositions. She answered on the first ring. I have the papers, Evelyn said before I could even speak. My copy arrived 10 minutes ago. I assume you are reading the part about his imaginary NBA career. I am, I said, rubbing my temples. Can he actually get anything, Evelyn? In the state of Illinois. Numbo, Evelyn replied, her voice crisp and reassuring. especially not with the prenuptial agreement we have on file. The infidelity clause is ironclad, Dominique. However, he can make this messy. He can drag this out in the press. He can force you to disclose your financial records publicly, which might spook your clients. That is his leverage. He knows he cannot win in court, so he is trying to win in the court of public opinion. He wants a settlement to go away. I looked at the framed photo on my desk. It was a picture of me and Tyrell from our honeymoon in Bali. I had paid for that trip too. I grabbed the frame and dropped it into the wastebasket. No settlements, I said. I will spend every dime I have on legal fees before I give that man a single cent for his silence. We will proceed with the motion to dismiss, Evelyn said. But Dominique, be careful. Desperate men do desperate things, and he has your sister whispering in his ear now. I hung up the phone, feeling a headache beginning to throb behind my eyes. I wanted to focus on my work. I had a catalog to finalize for the spring auction, a collection of rare impressionist paintings that needed to be authenticated. But my focus was shattered 20 minutes later when my intercom buzzed again. Ms. Sterling, the receptionist, said, her voice tight with panic. Your mother is here. I sighed. Send her in, Sarah. I barely had time to stand up before the glass doors to my office swung open. Bernice marched in wearing her Sunday best, a wide-brimmed hat adorned with fake flowers and a fur coat that I knew was synthetic. She looked like she was ready to address the congregation. She did not look like a mother coming to comfort her daughter. She slammed her purse down on my desk, right on top of the divorce papers. You have gone too far, Dominique. She announced, her voice booming off the glass walls. Hello to you too, mother. I said, sitting back down. To what do I owe the pleasure? Don't you take that tone with me, Bernice snapped. I just came from the hotel. The motel's 6, Dominique. My daughter carrying my grandchild is staying in a motel that smells like cigarettes and despair. Because of you. Because of her choices, I corrected calmly. She slept with my husband. Or did you forget that part of the Bible verse? Bernice waved her hand dismissively as if adultery was a minor parking violation. We all fall short of the glory of God, Dominique. The good book says, judge not lest you be judged. Tyrell made a mistake. Jasmine made a mistake. But you are making a choice to be cruel. You are choosing vengeance over family. She leaned over the desk, her eyes narrowing. Do you know what stress does to a pregnant woman? The doctor said Jasmine's blood pressure is up. If she loses this baby, that blood is on your hands. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the reason the Sterling line ends? I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had criticized my hair, my weight, and my career choices for 34 years. The woman who had always made excuses for Jasmine. Jasmine failed math because the teacher was bad. Jasmine crashed the car because the road was slippery. Jasmine slept with my husband because what? Because I worked too much. I am not the one who broke the family, mother, I said quietly. Bernice pulled a tissue from her sleeve and dabbed at her dry eyes. Tyrell is suffering too, she said, switching tactics. He is a broken man. He feels terrible about hurting you. But he had to file those papers. He has to survive, Dominique. He has no home, no income. You cut off his credit cards. How is he supposed to feed your sister? So this was it, the shakedown. Tyrell was the bad cop with the lawsuit, and Bernice was the good cop with the guilt trip. He can get a job, I suggested. Starbucks is hiring. Bernice slammed her hand on the desk. He is a Sterling by marriage. He is not going to work at a coffee shop. Look, Dominique, I am here to offer you a way out. A path to redemption. She straightened up, adjusting her hat. Drop the eviction order. Let them move back into the penthouse just until the baby is born. You can move into a hotel or stay at your condo downtown. Give them a monthly stipend. $5,000. That is nothing to you. Do this and we will stop the lawsuit. We will tell everyone on Instagram that it was a misunderstanding. We will restore your reputation. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted me to move out of my own home and pay my cheating husband and traitorous sister to live there. And if I refuse? I asked. Bernice's face hardened. The mask of piety slipped. Then the church will know. The community will know. I will tell everyone that you are abusive, that you hate children, that you are jealous of your sister's blessing. You will be a pariah, Dominique. You may have money, But you will have no one. I looked down at the divorce papers again. I thought about Evelyn's warning. He wants a settlement to go away. They were squeezing me from both sides. Legal pressure and social pressure. If I fought them head on, it would be ugly. It would be loud. And it would damage my business. But if I gave in, a thought sparked in my mind. A cold, dangerous idea. I remembered something my mentor taught me about art forgery. Sometimes the best way to catch a fake is to let it enter the market. Let the forger think they have succeeded. Let them get comfortable. And then, when the spotlight is brightest, you reveal the flaw. I needed them close. I needed them where I could see them. But not in my penthouse. My expression softened. I let my shoulders slump as if I was defeated. You are right, Mother, I said, lowering my voice. Bernice blinked, surprised by my sudden capitulation. I am. Yes. I have been angry. I have been hurt. But you are right. The baby is innocent. I do not want anything to happen to my niece or nephew. Bernice smiled a triumphant smirk that made my stomach turn. Praise God. I knew you had a heart in there somewhere. So, I will call Tyrell. They can move back in tonight. No, I said quickly. Not here. Bernice frowned. Why not? Because the paparazzi are already camping outside the building. I lied smoothly. Jasmine needs peace and quiet. She needs fresh air. She does not need cameras in her face every time she leaves the building. I opened my drawer and pulled out a set of keys. They were heavy brass keys attached to a leather fob. The lake house, I said. Bernice's eyes widened. The lake house in Wisconsin. The one you bought last year. I nodded. It is 2 hours away. It is private. It is fully stocked with food. There is a fireplace. It is a winter wonderland right now. Perfect for a pregnant woman to rest. I slid the keys across the desk. Let them stay there. I will pay the utilities. I will send a weekly grocery delivery. I will even give them a debit card with a modest allowance for emergencies. Bernice snatched the keys up as if they were made of gold. And the lawsuit, she asked? I will not contest the divorce, I said. We can work out the details later. But tell Tyrell to pause the legal action. If we are going to be a family again, we do not need lawyers. Bernice beamed. She walked around the desk and hugged me. It was a stiff, awkward hug. She smelled of mothballs and hypocrisy. You are doing the right thing, Dominique. God will bless you for this. You are finally acting like a big sister. I watched her walk out of the office, keys jingling in her hand. She looked victorious. She thought she had bullied me into submission. She thought she had won. As soon as the door closed, I picked up my phone and called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. He sounded sober, which was an improvement. They took the bait, I said. What did you give them? Ethan asked. The lake house, I replied. They are moving in tonight. There was a pause. Dom, isn't that place isolated? Extremely, I said. And Ethan? Did you finish installing the new security system I asked you to look at last month? The one with the internal cameras and audio recording for insurance purposes. Yes, Ethan said slowly. The cloud server is active. You can access it from your phone. Every room is wired except the bathrooms. Good, I said. But why, Dom? Ethan asked. Why give them a vacation home? Because Ethan, I said, turning my chair to look out at the gray city skyline. In the penthouse, they are my guests. But at the lake house, they are my prisoners. They just don't know it yet. I need to know everything they say. I need to know their next move before they make it. And most importantly, I need them to feel safe. I hung up the phone and pulled up the security app on my tablet. A grid of black screens appeared labeled living room, kitchen, master bedroom. I was not just an art appraiser anymore. I was a surveillance operator. Bernice was right about one thing. God works in mysterious ways. But she forgot that the devil works harder. And I was just clocking in. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for them to walk into it. And based on what I knew about my husband and sister, it wouldn't take long for them to start turning on each other once the boredom set in. I picked up the divorce papers and fed them into the shredder one page at a time, listening to the satisfying sound of Tyrell's demands being turned into confetti. See you in Wisconsin, Tyrell, I whispered. The art of deception is not about telling a lie that sounds true. It is about telling a lie that the other person desperately wants to believe. My husband Tyrell and my sister Jasmine wanted to believe that I was weak. They wanted to believe that my biological clock was ticking so loudly that it drowned out my self-respect. They wanted to believe that despite everything, I was still the dutiful daughter and the devoted wife who would sacrifice her own dignity to keep the sterling name intact. And so I prepared to give them exactly what they wanted. I invited them to dinner 2 nights after my mother stormed into my office. I did not hire a caterer. I did not have the housekeeper set the table. I did it myself. I wanted them to see me in the kitchen wearing an apron looking domestic and defeated. I wanted Tyrell to see the woman he thought he had broken. When the doorbell rang at 7 o'clock sharp, I took a deep breath. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. My makeup was softer than usual. I had left my hair down. I looked tired. I looked resigned. Perfect. I opened the door and there they were. Tyrell was wearing a suit I had bought him 3 Christmases ago. He looked tired too. But there was a smugness in the set of his jaw that made my skin crawl. Jasmine was standing slightly behind him wearing a loose-fitting dress that emphasized a baby bump that was barely there. She looked wary like a stray cat that wasn't sure if it was being fed or kicked. "Hello," Dominique Tyrell said. His voice was deep and smooth. The voice he used when he was trying to charm a new client into signing up for a life coaching package they didn't need. "Hello, Tyrell," I said, stepping back to let them in. "Hello, Jasmine." Jasmine mumbled a hello, avoiding my eyes. She clutched her purse tightly to her chest as she walked into the foyer. I watched her scan the room looking for the security guards who had thrown her out just 48 hours ago. "They are not here," I said quietly, closing the door. "Just us." We moved into the dining room. I had prepared a roast beef dinner. Comfort food. The kind of meal my mother used to make when she wanted to smooth over a family argument. The smell of rosemary and garlic filled the air, masking the toxicity that was radiating from my guests. We sat down in silence. The clinking of silverware against china sounded like sword fighting in the quiet room. Tyrell poured himself a glass of wine, my wine, without asking. He took a long sip and sighed, settling back into his chair as if he had never left. "This is good, Dom," he said. "You always did know how to cook a roast." I missed this. I gripped my fork so hard my knuckles turned white. He missed the roast. Not me, not our marriage. He missed the service. "I am glad you like it," I said, keeping my eyes on my plate. I wanted to talk. Calm. Rationally. Tyrell exchanged a look with Jasmine. A look that said, "See, I told you she would crack." Jasmine cleared her throat. "Mom said you wanted to help us." She said, her voice small and hesitant. "She said you changed your mind about the lawsuit." I looked up at my sister. I looked at the face that used to look up to me when we were children. The face I had protected from bullies on the playground. Now she was the bully. "I have been doing a lot of thinking," I lied. "I have been praying. Mother was right. Whatever has happened between us, whatever mistakes were made, there is an innocent life involved. That baby is my niece or nephew. I cannot punish a child for the sins of the parents." Tyrell nodded vigorously. "Exactly, Dom. That is what I have been trying to tell you. This is a blessing. We are expanding the family. It is unconventional, sure, but we can make it work." He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. His palm was warm and damp. It took every ounce of willpower I possessed, not to snatch my hand away and stab him with my steak knife. "I just want peace, Tyrell," I said, forcing a tremor into my voice. "I am tired of the fighting. I am tired of the press. I just want this scandal to go away." "Then drop the divorce," Tyrell said, squeezing my hand. "Let me move back in. We can raise the baby together here. You, Jasmine, and me. Like a modern family." I gently pulled my hand away. "No," I said, "that I cannot do. I am not a Saint Tyrell. I cannot watch you play house with my sister in my own home. It is too painful." Tyrell's face fell. "Then what are you offering Dominique?" "Because the Motel 6 is killing my back." I took a sip of water, letting the silence stretch out for a moment. I needed them to be desperate. I needed them to feel like they had no other options. "I am offering you the lake house," I said. Jasmine dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against her plate. "The lake house," she whispered. "The one in Lake Geneva. The one with the indoor pool." I nodded. It is fully winterized. It has 5 bedrooms, a chef's kitchen, and a view of the water that is incredibly peaceful. It is private. No reporters know about it. No neighbors to gossip. You can stay there until the baby is born. Rent-free. I saw the greed light up in Jasmine's eyes. She had always envied that house. She called it the Glass Palace because of the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room. And expenses, Tyrell asked, narrowing his eyes. It costs money to heat a place like that. And we need food. Supplies for the baby? I will cover the utilities, I said. And I will provide a monthly allowance of $3,000 for groceries and essentials. On one condition. Tyrell leaned back, crossing his arms. He felt in control now. He was negotiating. What condition, he asked. Complete discretion, I said. No social media. No interviews. No posting photos of the house. You disappear. You live quietly. You focus on the pregnancy, and you leave me alone to repair my reputation in Chicago. If I see one Instagram story, one tweet, the deal is off, and the eviction notice is back on. Tyrell pretended to think about it. He looked at Jasmine. She gave him a tiny, eager nod. She was already mentally decorating the nursery in my vacation home. He turned back to me, a smug smile playing on his lips. $3,000 isn't much, Dom, he said. Make it 5. Babies are expensive. And I need to commute back to the city for clients. I knew he had no clients. I knew he just wanted walking around money for his poker games. But I had to let him win this small battle to win the war. Fine, I said, letting out a defeated sigh. $5,000. But that is it. Tyrell grinned. He stood up and walked around the table. He put his hands on my shoulders and massaged them briefly. I went rigid. I knew you would come around, he said, kissing the top of my head. You are a good woman, Dominique. A little stiff, maybe. But you know where your duty lies. You won't regret this. I stood up abruptly, breaking his contact. The keys are on the hallway table, I said, walking toward the kitchen. The security code is 1234. Simple enough for you to remember. You can go tonight. The pantry is stocked. They didn't even finish their dinner. They were too excited. I heard them in the hallway whispering aggressively. Did you see her face? Jasmine whispered. She is broken. I told you, Tyrell replied. She needs me. She can't function without me. We got the house, babe. We got the house and the money. We are set. I heard the front door open and close. I heard the lock click. I stood in the kitchen staring at the half-eaten roast beef. The silence rushed back into the penthouse. But this time it wasn't lonely. It was expectant. I waited 5 minutes to make sure they were actually in the elevator. Then I walked into my office and locked the door. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I logged into a secure server that Ethan and I had set up over the weekend. Tyrell thought he was a negotiator. He thought he had squeezed a free vacation and a salary out of his ex-wife. He thought the lake house was a sanctuary. It wasn't a sanctuary. It was a soundstage. Ethan had been brilliant. When I told him the plan, he had driven up to Wisconsin overnight. He had installed high-definition microphones in the living room, the kitchen, and most importantly, the master bedroom. He had placed cameras in the common areas, disguised as smoke detectors and motion sensors. I typed in the password. The screen flickered to life. A grid of 6 camera feeds appeared. The house was dark and quiet, currently waiting for its new tenants. I checked the audio feed. Crystal clear. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen 300 miles away. I leaned back in my chair and poured myself a glass of real scotch. Not the cheap wine I had served them. They thought I was giving them privacy. In reality, I was putting them in a glass jar. Tyrell was right about one thing. Babies are expensive, but ignorance is going to cost him everything. I watched the screen waiting. It would take them about 2 hours to drive there. 2 hours until the show began. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Ethan. The Trojan horse is inside the gates. Get the popcorn. Then I sat there in the dark watching the empty rooms of my beautiful lake house waiting for the rats to move in. I wondered how long it would take for them to start talking. I wondered how long it would take for Tyrell to call his bookie, or for Jasmine to call whoever the real father was. Because one thing I knew for sure about liars is that they cannot help themselves. When they think no one is listening, they tell the truth. And I would be listening to every single word. The digital clock on my laptop screen ticked forward. My anger, which had been a hot, raging fire all day, cooled into something hard and sharp like a diamond. Go ahead, Tyrell, I whispered to the screen. Get comfortable. Drink my liquor. Sleep in my sheets. Think you have won. Because the higher you climb, the harder you fall. And I am the one controlling the gravity. About 2 hours and 15 minutes later, headlights swept across the driveway on camera 1. I sat up. A car door slammed. Camera 2 in the living room showed the front door opening. Tyrell walked in first carrying a duffel bag. He flipped the light switch. The room flooded with warm light revealing the stone fireplace and the plush leather furniture. He dropped the bag on the floor and spun around spreading his arms wide. Welcome to the good life, baby. He shouted, his voice coming through my speakers loud and clear. Jasmine walked in shaking snow off her coat. She looked around wide-eyed. Oh my God, Tyrell, she said. This place is amazing. Look at that view. Tyrell laughed. He walked over to the mini bar in the corner and grabbed a bottle of bourbon. I told you she would cave, he said, pouring a drink. Dominique is weak. She talks tough, but deep down she is desperate for approval. We just have to keep playing the victim card, and she will keep signing the checks. Jasmine walked over and took the glass from him, taking a sip. Do you think she suspects anything? She asked. About the baby, Tyrell scoffed. Please, Dominique is book smart, but she is street stupid. She thinks this is a miracle. She has no idea. Besides, who is she going to believe, us or her own paranoia? He toasted the empty air. To the Sterling family, he said, and to the idiot paying for it. I watched them clink glasses. I watched them laugh at my expense. I took a sip of my scotch. Cheers, Tyrell, I said to the empty room. Enjoy the drink. It will be the last one you ever enjoy on my dime. I reached for my notepad and wrote down the timestamp. 9:42 p.m. Admission of manipulation. This was going to be easier than I thought. While Tyrell and Jasmine were waking up to the pristine view of a frozen lake believing they had won the lottery, I was waking up to a spreadsheet full of red ink. The morning sun was streaming through the windows of my office at the auction house, but the light did nothing to warm the chill in the room. Ethan was sitting across from me, and the man looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 days. He had spent the entire night going through the books of his architecture firm. Jasmine had been his office manager for 3 years. He had trusted her implicitly. She handled payroll invoices and vendor contracts. He was the creative genius, and she was the organized sister-in-law who kept the lights on. Or so he thought. Ethan pushed a stack of papers across the mahogany desk toward me. His hands were shaking, not from sadness this time, but from a rage so deep it vibrated in the air between us. Look at page 4, Ethan said, his voice rough like gravel. Look at the vendor payments for the last 18 months. I picked up the document. My eyes scanned the rows of numbers. I saw payments to a company called TS Consulting. The amounts were irregular. 2,000 here, 5,000 there. Sometimes 10,000 on a Friday afternoon. Who is TS Consulting? I asked, though I already had a sickening suspicion. Ethan laughed a dry, humorless bark. I looked up the LLC registration this morning, Ethan said. It stands for Tyrell Sterling. I felt the blood drain from my face. My husband had been billing my brother-in-law's company for consulting services. What kind of consulting does an architect need from a failed basketball player? None. Ethan replied. Those were phantom invoices. Jasmine was writing checks to Tyrell from my business account. She coded them as site management fees or expediting costs. I never checked because I trusted her. She was my fiancée Dom. She was supposed to be the mother of my children. I pulled out my calculator and started punching in the numbers. My fingers flew across the keys. The total climbed higher and higher. $212,000, I whispered, staring at the final figure. She stole over $200,000 from you in less than 2 years. Ethan nodded, staring at the floor. That is the down payment for the new house we were going to build, he said softly. That is the profit margin for the entire fiscal year. She didn't just cheat on me, Dom. She robbed me. She gutted my company to fund his lifestyle. I leaned back in my chair trying to make sense of it. I knew Tyrell liked nice things. I knew he liked expensive dinners and custom suits. But I paid for those. I paid for the lease on his Range Rover. I paid for his gym memberships. Why did he need an extra 200 grand in cash? He isn't buying clothes with this, Ethan said, answering my unspoken question. Look at the dates of the withdrawals. They always happen on Thursdays. I looked. He was right. Every Thursday, a check was cut. What happens on Thursdays? I asked. Ethan pulled out another piece of paper. This one was a screenshot from a sports betting website. Thursday night football, Ethan said, and Friday is poker night at the Underground in the Warehouse District. The puzzle pieces slammed together in my mind. Tyrell wasn't just a mooch. He was a gambling addict. I had suspected it years ago when money went missing from my wallet, but he had sworn he stopped. He swore he was going to Gamblers Anonymous. It turned out he hadn't stopped. He had just found a new bank, and that bank was my sister. This explains everything, I said, standing up and pacing the room. It explains why Jasmine was always broke despite her salary. It explains why Tyrell was always desperate for cash. He was bleeding you dry to pay the house. But 200 grand is a lot of money, Ethan said. Where did it go? He doesn't have any assets to show for it. I walked over to the window looking down at the busy Chicago street. That is the question, isn't it? I said. If he stole 200 grand and he is still broke, then he didn't win. He lost. And if he lost that much money to the wrong people, I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. It was a private investigator named Marcus who specialized in asset recovery and high-stakes background checks. He was expensive, discreet, and terrifyingly efficient. Marcus answered on the second ring. Sterling. He said, his voice deep and calm. I saw your name in the news. Trouble in paradise. You could say that, I replied. I need a full financial autopsy on my husband. Not the credit report. I need the street report. I need to know who he owes and how much. And Marcus, I need it by lunch. Done, Marcus said, and hung up. I looked back at Ethan. We have them on embezzlement, I said. That is a felony. We can send Jasmine to prison for 5 years just with these papers. Ethan looked at the spreadsheet, his eyes hardening. I want to do it, he said. I want to press charges. Not yet, I commanded. We need the full picture. If Tyrell is in deep with bookies, that makes him dangerous. Desperate men do crazy things. We need to know exactly how desperate he is before we corner him. The answer came 3 hours later. My computer pinged with an encrypted email from Marcus. The subject line was simply the whole. I opened the attachment. It wasn't a spreadsheet, it was a dossier. Photos of Tyrell entering an unmarked door in a bad part of town. Photos of him arguing with a man who looked like he broke femurs for a living. And a scan of a handwritten ledger that Marcus had somehow acquired. I read the summary and felt a cold chill run down my spine. Tyrell didn't just lose Ethan's money. He had chased his losses. He had borrowed on margin. He had taken loans from loan sharks at 60% interest. The total debt was $540,000. And the deadline for payment was the end of the month. I looked at the calendar. That was in 2 weeks. Oh my God, I whispered. Ethan looked over my shoulder reading the report. He is a dead man walking, Ethan said. If he doesn't pay, they will kill him. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. This is why they did it. I realized aloud. The pregnancy, the baby, the lawsuit. It wasn't just about jealousy. It was a survival strategy. Tyrell needed access to my assets. He needed a settlement. He needed alimony. He needed 50% of the penthouse so he could liquidate it and pay off the sharks before they put him in a concrete coat. He isn't fighting for custody of a child, I said. He is fighting for his life. And he used my sister as the vessel to get to my money. Does Jasmine know? Ethan asked. I thought about it. Jasmine was greedy, but she wasn't suicidal. I don't think she knows the extent of it, I said. She thinks they are Bonnie and Clyde pulling a fast one on the rich sister. She doesn't realize she's the getaway driver for a man who has a target on his back. Just then, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was from an app I rarely checked. eBay. I had set up alerts years ago for specific designer items, rare vintage pieces that I collected. The alert read, New listing matching your saved search, Chanel Classic Flat Bag, limited edition alligator. I frowned. That was a very specific bag. I owned one. It was a gift to myself when I made partner at the auction house. It was worth $30,000. I clicked the link. The photos were blurry but unmistakable. The bag was sitting on a bedspread with a distinctive floral pattern. The pattern of the guest bedspread at my lake house. I scrolled to the seller's profile. The username was BallerLife88. The account was created 2 days ago. Location Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. He is selling my bags, I said, my voice trembling. He went into the master closet at the lake house, which I specifically locked, and he is selling my collection on eBay for pennies on the dollar. I showed the screen to Ethan. Buy it now. Price is $5,000, Ethan read. He is selling a $30,000 bag for $5,000. He needs quick cash, I said. Probably to pay the interest on the loan so they don't break his thumbs this week. I stood up and grabbed my coat. Where are you going? Ethan asked. I am not going anywhere, I said. I am going to buy the bag. I tapped the Buy It Now button on my phone. Transaction complete. I walked over to the window, staring out at the gray sky. He is stealing from me while living in my house, eating my food and sleeping with my sister, I said quietly. He thinks he is clever. He thinks he is a hustler. I turned back to Ethan. He just committed grand larceny across state lines, I said. Add that to the embezzlement. Add that to the fraud. Ethan stood up, his face grim. So do we call the police now? He asked. No. I said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face. We wait. We let him think he sold the bag. We let him think he has some cash coming. We let him feel safe. And then we confront him when he has nowhere left to run. I looked at the live feed of the lake house on my second monitor. Tyrell was in the living room pacing back and forth on the phone, probably begging for more time from his creditors. You dug your own grave, Tyrell, I whispered. I am just going to help you fill it in. Ethan picked up the stack of financial records. I will keep digging, he said. If he embezzled 200 grand, there has to be more. I want to know every cent he took. Do it, I said. And Ethan. Yeah. When we are done with them, they won't just be broke. They will be in debt to society for a very long time. Ethan nodded and walked out of the office. I sat alone in the silence, looking at the picture of the Chanel bag on my phone screen. He sold my memories for poker chips. He sold my trust for a quick fix. I picked up my pen and wrote a new note on my legal pad. Loan sharks, 500,000. Embezzlement, 200,000. Theft, 30,000. The bill was coming due, and unlike Tyrell, I always collected my debts. The phone rang again. It was Marcus. One more thing, Sterling, Marcus said. I checked the phone records. Tyrell calls that number a lot, but there is another number he calls even more. A burner phone? Who does it belong to? I asked. I don't know yet, Marcus said, but the pings are coming from the same cell tower as your mother's church. My grip tightened on the phone. The church, I repeated. Yeah, Marcus said. Whoever he is talking to, they are spending a lot of time in the rectory. I hung up, feeling the room spin slightly. The church, the money, the sister, the husband. The web was bigger than I thought. And right in the center of it sat the one person I had never suspected of being a player in this game. I needed to listen to the audio feeds from the lake house. I needed to hear what Jasmine was saying when she thought no one was listening. Because if my suspicions were right, Tyrell wasn't the only one with a secret that could destroy the family. I opened the laptop and put on my headphones. Let the show begin, I said. The human mind is a fascinating archivist. It stores millions of memories, some in bright vivid color, and others in sepia-tone shadows. Usually we bury the traumatic ones deep in the basement of our subconscious. But sometimes a single piece of information can act as a key, unlocking a door we forgot we even had. As I sat in my office staring at the financial ruin Tyrell had brought upon us, a specific memory from 5 years ago clawed its way to the surface. It was a Tuesday in November 2018. Tyrell had called me from an ambulance. He was screaming in pain. He told me he had been fouled hard during a pickup game at the YMCA. He told everyone it was his knee. He told the world that he blew out his ACL, and that was why his NBA dreams died. But I was there at the hospital. I remembered the look on the triage nurse's face. I remembered that they did not wheel him to orthopedics. They wheeled him to urology. I sat up straight in my chair, my heart hammering a new rhythm against my ribs. Ethan looked up from his stack of invoices. "What is it, Dom? You look like you just saw a ghost." I did not answer him immediately. My fingers were already flying across my laptop keyboard, closing the bank statements and opening a new browser window. I navigated to the portal of our health insurance provider. Because I was the primary breadwinner, I was the primary policyholder. Tyrell was a dependent. And because Tyrell was lazy, he never managed his own medical logins. He relied on me to pay the premiums, to file the claims, and to store the records. I typed in my password. The screen loaded a blue dashboard showing our coverage history. I remembered the surgery. It was emergency surgery. Tyrell had been so embarrassed afterwards. He refused to talk about it. He made me promise never to discuss the specifics with anyone, especially his mother. He played up the knee injury story so well that eventually, even I started to believe it was just a knee injury, but deep down I knew. It wasn't his knee. It was blunt force trauma to the groin. A knee to the groin from a 200-pound opponent while Tyrell was mid-air. I navigated to the claims history archive. I scrolled back. 2023. 2022. 2022. There it was. November 14, 2018. Provider, Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Dr. Anthony Evans, Chief of Urology. I clicked on the explanation of benefits. It gave me the billing codes but not the diagnosis. I needed more. I needed the doctor's notes. I went to the Messages tab. I had archived a secure message from Dr. Evans' office from that year regarding postoperative care. I clicked open the attachment. My hand hovered over the mouse. If I was right, if my memory served me correctly, then the entire foundation of Tyrell and Jasmine's betrayal was about to disintegrate into dust. I opened the PDF. It was a surgical summary. I skipped past the technical jargon about anesthesia and incision sites. I scanned down to the prognosis section. The words were black and stark against the white background. Patient suffered bilateral testicular rupture due to severe blunt force trauma. Emergency reconstruction attempted due to prolonged ischemia and extensive tissue damage. Viability is compromised. I read the next line, and the air left my lungs. Post-operative analysis confirms azoospermia. Patient has been advised that natural conception is a statistical impossibility. The condition is irreversible. Patient declined sperm banking prior to procedure due to emergency nature of surgery. I read it again. Irreversible. Statistical impossibility. I sat back in my leather chair and let out a breath that sounded like a laugh but felt like a sob. Tyrell was sterile. He had been sterile for 5 years. He knew it. The doctor had told him. I remembered now. I remembered him crying in the hospital bed, not from pain but from a deep guttural shame. He had told me he was crying because he couldn't play ball anymore. But he was crying because he felt like he was less of a man. And in the African American community, especially for a man like Tyrell, whose entire identity was wrapped up in his masculinity and his physical prowess, this was a secret worth killing for. This was why he never talked about it. This was why he compensated with the flashy cars and the womanizing. He was trying to prove a virility he did not possess. But there was a bigger implication here. A much bigger one. I turned the laptop screen toward Ethan. "Read the highlighted paragraph," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed energy. Ethan leaned. He squinted at the screen. He read the word slowly, moving his lips slightly. Bilateral rupture. Azoospermia. Impossible. He stopped. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide, enormous pools of confusion that slowly clarified into shock. "Wait, Dom," he whispered. "If Tyrell is sterile." I nodded slowly. "If Tyrell is sterile, then he cannot be the father," I said. Ethan stood up. He knocked his chair over. It clattered to the floor, but neither of us moved to pick it up. "But Jasmine is pregnant," Ethan said, pacing the room. "I saw the test. I saw the ultrasound pictures she posted on Facebook. She is definitely pregnant." Yes, I said, standing up to join him. She's pregnant, but not by my husband. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pulling at the roots. This means she is lying to him too. I walked over to the window, looking out at the city lights. My mind was racing, connecting dots that I didn't even know existed. Think about it, Ethan, I said. Tyrell is desperate for money. Jasmine is desperate for attention and status. They team up. Jasmine gets pregnant. She tells Tyrell it is a miracle. A 1 in a million shot. Tyrell wants to believe it. His ego needs to believe it. He thinks God has healed him. He thinks he is a super stud who defied medical science. So he buys into the lie, Ethan continued. And he uses the pregnancy to sue you for alimony. To claim he has an heir. Exactly, I said. He is basing his entire lawsuit, his entire claim to my fortune, on a child that biologically cannot be his. And Jasmine, Ethan asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Who is the father, Dom? I turned back to face him. The realization was cold and heavy in my gut. That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Who else was Jasmine seeing? Who else had access to her? I thought about the timeline. Jasmine spent all her time at work or at church. She didn't have a social life outside of the family. She was always at the architecture firm or... My mind flashed back to the call Marcus, the private investigator, had mentioned. The burner phone. The calls pinging off the cell tower near my mother's church. The church, Ethan said, reading my mind. She is the choir director, Dom. She is there 3 nights a week for practice. I walked back to the desk and pulled up the report from Marcus again. I looked at the number Tyrell had been calling. The burner phone. Tyrell knows something, I said. Or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he suspects. But right now he is living in a fantasy world, where he is the patriarch of a new dynasty. I looked at the medical report again. This piece of paper was more valuable than my entire art collection. This was the nuclear launch code. We have to tell him, Ethan said, reaching for the phone. We have to call him and tell him he is being played. No! I shouted, slamming my hand down on the desk. Ethan froze. We do not tell him, I said, lowering my voice. Not yet. Why not, Dom? This destroys their alliance. This turns them against each other. Because, I said, a cruel smile touching my lips, if we tell him now he might kill her. Or he might run. He owes $500,000 to violent men, Ethan. If he finds out his golden ticket, his miracle baby, is a lie, he will have nothing left to lose. He might do something rash. I walked over to the printer and hit print. The medical report slid out warm and crisp. We save this, I said. We save this for the moment of maximum impact. We let them think they are safe. We let Jasmine get bigger. We let Tyrell brag to his friends. We let my mother plan the baby shower. We let them build this house of cards so high that when we pull the bottom card out, the crash will be heard all over Chicago. Ethan picked up the chair he had knocked over. He sat down heavily. You are terrifying, Dominique, he said. I am focused, Ethan, I corrected. I am an appraiser. I look for provenance. I look for authenticity. And I just discovered that my sister's pregnancy is a forgery. I picked up the medical report and folded it neatly, placing it in my safe. But we need to know who the real father is, I said. We need the final piece of the puzzle. If it is not Tyrell and it is not you, then it is someone close, someone she trusts. I looked at the live feed of the lake house again. Tyrell was asleep on the sofa, mouth open, snoring. Jasmine was in the kitchen eating ice cream out of the carton. She looked content. She looked like a woman who thought she had gotten away with the perfect crime. She didn't know that her sister was watching. She didn't know that her sister knew about the vas deferens, and the ischemia, and the azoospermia. She didn't know that her baby bump was actually a ticking time bomb. I am going to find out who the father is, I told Ethan. And when I do, I am going to invite him to the baby shower too. Ethan looked at me with a mixture of fear and admiration. How, he asked. I tapped the screen where Jasmine was licking a spoon. She is lonely, I said. She is stuck in a house with a man who is secretly broke and terrified. She is carrying a secret that could ruin her life. She will want to talk to someone. She will want to talk to the father. I put my headphones back on. I am going to listen to every breath she takes, I said. Every whisper. Every phone call. And just as I said that, on the screen, Jasmine pulled a phone out of her pocket. Not her main phone. A small cheap flip phone. A burner. She looked over her shoulder at the sleeping Tyrell. Then she walked into the pantry and closed the door. I turned up the volume on the kitchen microphone. It was muffled through the door, but I could hear her voice. Pick up, she whispered. Then a pause. Hello? She said, her voice softening into a tone I had never heard her use with Ethan. It is me. I am safe. We are at the lake house. No. He doesn't suspect anything. He thinks it is a miracle. I held my breath, pressing the headphones tighter to my ears. I need money, Jasmine whispered. Tyrell is broke. I need you to help me. If this baby comes out looking like you. She stopped. I know, she hissed. We have to be careful. But I miss you. I hate it here with him. I wish I was with you at the rectory. The rectory. My eyes locked with Ethan's. The rectory is the housing for the clergy. My mother's church. Jasmine was sleeping with the pastor. I ripped the headphones off and stared at Ethan. It is Pastor Jenkins, I whispered. The man who baptized us. The man who married me and Tyrell. The man my mother treats like a living saint. Ethan's jaw dropped. Pastor Jenkins is 60 years old, Dom. He is married. He is rich, I said. And he has influence. And Jasmine has always had a thing for older men with power. I looked back at the screen. Jasmine was coming out of the pantry looking flushed and anxious. This is it, I said. This is the end game. Tyrell thinks he is the father. Ethan thinks he was the fiancé. But the real father is the pillar of the community, the moral compass of our family. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest. A dark, hysterical laugh. My mother said this baby was God's will, I said. It turns out it was just the pastor's will. I stood up and grabbed my coat. Come on, Ethan, I said. Where are we going? He asked. To church, I said. I think it is time we paid a visit to the good Reverend. We need a sample. A hair. A cup. Anything for a DNA test. The medical anomaly was solved. Tyrell was shooting blanks. But Pastor Jenkins? He apparently didn't miss. And I was going to make sure his aim destroyed everything he had built. The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in my office, casting long dancing shadows against the walls filled with art I had spent a lifetime collecting. Ethan and I sat in silence, sharing a bottle of water and a pair of high-definition headphones. We were like two ghosts haunting the living. We were watching the Lake House live feed, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was 2 a.m. On the screen, Tyrell was passed out on the leather sofa. His mouth open. His arm hanging limp over the side. The bourbon bottle on the coffee table was empty. He looked pathetic. He looked like a man who was trying to drink away the knowledge that his kneecaps had an expiration date. But Jasmine was awake. I watched her on camera 3, which covered the kitchen. She was pacing back and forth wearing one of my silk robes that she had stolen from the master closet. She looked agitated. She kept checking her phone, the cheap burner phone, not her regular one. She stopped in front of the refrigerator, staring at her reflection in the stainless steel. Then she dialed. I turned up the volume on the audio feed. The microphone hidden in the crown molding picked up every breath. Pick up, she hissed. Pick up, you old fool. She waited. She tapped her fingernails against the granite countertop. The sound was sharp and rhythmic like a ticking clock. Finally she began to speak. Her voice changed instantly. It dropped an octave, becoming breathless and fearful. Hello, she said. I am sorry to call so late. I know you are at home with Sister Margaret, but I had to call. Tyrell is asleep. She paused, listening to the person on the other end. I know we agreed no calls, she said, her voice rising slightly. But the situation has changed. Dominique kicked us out. We are at the lake house. No. Nobody knows where it is. We are safe. But we are broke. I looked at Ethan. He was scribbling notes on a legal pad, his brow furrowed. I need more than prayers right now, Jasmine said. I need cash. Tyrell has debts. Bad debts. If he doesn't pay them, he is going to spiral. And if he spirals, he might start talking. You don't want him to talk, do you? You don't want him to tell the congregation how he really hurt his leg back in 2018. Or how I really got pregnant. I froze. The congregation. Ethan stopped writing. He looked at me, his eyes wide. You promised me. Jasmine continued, her voice hardening. You said if I kept you happy, if I came to the rectory for our private counseling sessions, you would take care of us. You said I was your special favor. Well, I am carrying your special favor right now, and I am hungry. She listened again. Then she laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. Don't quote scripture at me, she snapped. The Lord provides, but he uses wire transfers too. I need $10,000 by Friday. Or else I'm going to have a very long, very honest conversation with my mother. And you know how Bernice is. She worships the ground you walk on, but if she finds out her shepherd has been bedding her daughter, she will burn that church to the ground. The person on the other end must have agreed because Jasmine's shoulders relaxed. Thank you, she purred. Thank you, Pastor. I knew you would do the right thing. I will see you on Sunday. She hung up the phone. I sat back in my chair feeling like the wind had been knocked out of me. Pastor. There was only one pastor in Jasmine's life. Only one man my mother Bernice allowed to have that kind of influence over our family. Pastor Jenkins. The Reverend Dr. Marcus Jenkins. The head of Greater Grace Tabernacle. The man who had baptized me. The man who had officiated my wedding to Tyrell. The man who sat at the head of our table every Thanksgiving because my mother believed having him there brought blessings to the food. He was 65 years old. He had a wife, Sister Margaret, who ran the charity drive. He was a pillar of the community, a man who preached about the sanctity of marriage and the evils of the flesh every single Sunday while wiping sweat from his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. And he was sleeping with my sister. Oh my God, Ethan whispered. It is Jenkins. That is why she was at the church so much. That is why she joined the choir even though she can't sing. I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just the affair. It was the power dynamic. Jenkins had known Jasmine since she was a child. He had groomed her. He had used his position of authority, his connection to our mother, to get close to her. And now she was using that same connection to blackmail him. But the horror wasn't over. On the screen, the living room light flickered. Tyrell was waking up. I watched as he stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. He saw Jasmine standing there clutching the burner phone. Who were you talking to? He mumbled, his voice thick with sleep and alcohol. Jasmine didn't hide the phone. She didn't look guilty. She looked triumphant. The bank, she said. Tyrell straightened up. The mention of money sobered him up instantly. Did he pick up? Tyrell asked. Yeah, Jasmine said, walking over to the island. He picked up. He tried to give me the runaround, talking about faith and patience. I told him faith doesn't pay the loan sharks. And Tyrell asked, stepping closer. He is wiring $10,000 on Friday, Jasmine said. Tyrell let out a whoop of joy. He grabbed Jasmine and spun her around. I knew it, he shouted. I knew the old man would pay up. He is too scared of his reputation. He would sell his soul to keep Sister Margaret from finding out. He kissed Jasmine on the cheek. A loud, wet smack. You are a genius, baby, Tyrell said. A genius. We are going to bleed him dry. We take his money, we take Dominique's money, and we live like kings. I stared at the screen, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. Tyrell knew. He wasn't just a cuckold. He wasn't just a victim of a lie. He was a participant. He knew the baby wasn't his. He knew his wife was sleeping with the pastor. And he didn't care. In fact, he was encouraging it. He was pimping out my sister to the pastor to pay off his gambling debts. The level of depravity was suffocating. I had thought Tyrell was just a cheater. I had thought he was weak. But this was something else. This was evil. He had turned our family, our faith, and his own marriage into a criminal enterprise. Ethan stood up and walked to the trash can. He dry heaved. I don't blame you, I said quietly. It makes me sick too. Ethan wiped his mouth and turned back to me. His face was pale, his eyes burning with a cold fury. They are monsters, Dom, he said. All of them. Jenkins, Tyrell, Jasmine. They are all in on it. And my mother, I added. She is the unintended architect of this nightmare. She pushed Jasmine toward the church. She pushed Tyrell toward me. She created this pressure cooker of expectations and appearances. And now it has exploded into this. I looked at the image of Tyrell and Jasmine celebrating in my kitchen. They were opening a bottle of champagne now. my champagne, toasting to their successful extortion of a clergyman. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the calm of absolute clarity. There was no going back now. There was no mercy left in my heart. Before tonight, I had planned to ruin them financially. I had planned to embarrass them. But now? Now I had to destroy them. I had to burn the whole corrupt structure down to the ground. I turned to Ethan. "We have the recording," I said. "Yes," Ethan said. "It is saved to the cloud." "Good. Now we need the proof." "What kind of proof?" Ethan asked. "Physical proof," I said. "We know Tyrell is sterile. We know Jenkins is the father. But a jury needs more than a wiretap. A congregation needs more than a rumor. We need DNA." I opened my laptop and pulled up the church's website. I looked at the schedule. "Sunday service is in 3 days," I said. "Pastor Jenkins will be preaching. Jasmine will be there in the choir loft, playing the role of the saintly mother-to-be. Tyrell will be in the front row, playing the proud father. And my mother will be there wearing her biggest hat, praising the Lord for her blessings." "I am going to be there too," I said. Ethan looked at me. "You are going to church. You haven't been back there since the wedding." "I am going back," I said. "And I am going to get close to Jenkins. I need a sample, a hair, a used tissue, a coffee cup, anything." "But how?" Ethan asked. "He is surrounded by deacons. You can't just walk up and pluck a hair from his head." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "I am a major donor, Ethan, or at least I used to be. And sinners always welcome a wealthy saint who wants to repent. I will tell him I want to make a donation, a peace offering. I will tell him I want to support the youth ministry. He won't be able to resist. He is greedy just like the rest of them." I looked back at the screen one last time. Tyrell was counting on his fingers, calculating how much of the blackmail money he could gamble with. "Enjoy the money, Tyrell," I whispered. "Because the collection plate is coming around, and this time you are going to put in everything you have." The next morning, I went to work with a new energy. I wasn't tired. I was electrified. I spent the morning moving assets, protecting my accounts, and finalizing the sale of the lake house. Yes, I had already listed it. By the time I kicked them out, it would belong to someone else. At lunch, I drove to the pharmacy. I bought a DNA collection kit. The high-end kind. The kind that provided legally admissible results if handled correctly. Then I drove to the church. Greater Grace Tabernacle was a massive brick building on the south side of Chicago. It had a steeple that touched the clouds and stained glass windows that cost more than most of the congregation made in a year. It was a monument to Pastor Jenkins's ego. I walked into the administrative office. The church secretary, Mrs. Higgins, looked up over her reading glasses. She recognized me immediately. "Dominique," she gasped. "We haven't seen you in ages. Your mother told us about the situation. We have been praying for you." "I bet you have," I thought. "Praying for my money." "Hello, Mrs. Higgins," I said, putting on my best repentant smile. "My mother is right. I have been lost. But the baby? The baby has made me realize what is important. I want to see Pastor Jenkins. I want to make things right." Mrs. Higgins beamed. "Oh, praise God," she said. "He is in his study. He is preparing his sermon, but he always has time for a sterling. Go right in." I walked down the hallway. The carpet was plush. The walls were lined with photos of Jenkins shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. I knocked on the heavy oak door. "Come," in a deep baritone voice called out. I opened the door. Pastor Jenkins was sitting behind a desk that was bigger than my car. He was wearing a silk vest. He looked surprised to see me, but he masked it quickly with a practiced smile. "Dominique," he said, standing up and extending a hand. "To what do I owe this honor?" I took his hand. It was soft and manicured. I resisted the urge to wipe my hand on my skirt. "I came to apologize, Pastor," I said, lowering my head. "I reacted badly to Jasmine's news. I was jealous, but I want to support her. And I want to support the church." Jenkins' eyes lit up. He sat back down, gesturing for me to take a seat. "That is wonderful to hear, Dominique. Forgiveness is a divine gift." I saw a coffee cup on his desk. It was from a local cafe. There was a lipstick stain on the rim. Not his wife's shade. It was Jasmine's shade. Ruby Woo. He hadn't even thrown it away. I reached into my purse and pulled out my checkbook. I want to make a donation, I said, for the building fund. I wrote a check for $5,000. It was a lot of money, but it was an investment. I slid the check across the desk. Jenkins picked it up, his eyes widening. "Bless you, Dominique," he said. "This will do great work." He reached for his coffee cup to take a sip. I watched him. He drank. He set it down. I stood up. "Thank you, Pastor," I said. "I feel better already. Oh wait, I think I left my phone in the car." I turned to leave, then paused. "Actually, Pastor, could I have a glass of water? I am feeling a little faint." "Of course," Jenkins said. He stood up and walked to the water cooler in the corner of the room. While his back was turned, I moved fast. I reached out and grabbed the coffee cup. I dumped the remaining liquid into the potted plant next to the desk. I dropped the cup into my oversized purse. "Here you go," Dominique Jenkins said, turning back with a paper cup of water. I took it smiling. "Thank you, Pastor. You have no idea how much you have helped me today." I walked out of the church clutching my purse like it contained the crown jewels. I got into my car and drove 2 blocks away before I pulled over. I put on a pair of latex gloves. I took the coffee cup out of my purse and sealed it in the evidence bag from the DNA kit. I had the sample. Now I just needed to compare it to the baby. But I couldn't get the baby's DNA yet. The baby wasn't born. Wait. I remembered something else from the wiretap. Jasmine had said, "If the baby comes out looking like you," but there was a way to know before birth, a non-invasive prenatal paternity test. It required blood from the mother, and a cheek swab from the alleged father. I had the father's DNA on the cup. I needed Jasmine's blood, and I knew exactly how to get it. Jasmine had a prenatal checkup on Thursday. My mother had mentioned it. She was going to Dr. Alcott, the family OBGYN. Dr. Alcott was an old friend of mine. I had appraised his art collection last year. I started the car. I wasn't just going to get a DNA test. I was going to buy the results. The pieces were falling into place. The sterile husband, the pregnant sister, the millionaire pastor, and me, the woman holding the match. Sunday was going to be a very interesting service. I hoped the choir was ready to sing because I was about to bring the house down. They say the devil is in the details, but I have always found that the devil is actually in the fine print. Most people do not read contracts. They look at the bold numbers at the top, the dollar signs, and the zeros, and they let their greed blind them to the clauses at the bottom that will eventually hang them. My husband Tyrell was a man defined by his appetites. He saw what he wanted and he grabbed it. He never stopped to ask what the catch was, and today I was counting on that flaw to seal his fate. It was Friday morning. The sky over Lake Geneva was a flat slate gray, promising more snow. I sat in my car at the end of the long driveway, watching the house through the bare trees. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was a text from Marcus, the private investigator. Subject: urgent update, message. The Sharks gave him 24 hours. They paid him a visit at the grocery store yesterday. If he doesn't come up with 50 grand by tonight, they are going to break his legs. The rest of the $500,000 is due next month. I smiled. The timing was exquisite. Tyrell was not just desperate, he was terrified. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals do not think rationally. They snap at the first hand that offers them food. I picked up the leather portfolio on the seat next to me. Inside was a 30-page document drafted by Evelyn Vance, my brilliant attorney. We had stayed up until 3 in the morning, perfecting the language. It was a masterpiece of legal entrapment. I drove up the driveway and parked. The house looked quiet, but I knew the chaos inside. I walked to the front door and punched in the code. When I stepped inside, the air smelled of stale pizza and fear. Tyrell was pacing the living room. He looked terrible. His eyes were sunken, and he had a nervous twitch in his left cheek. He jumped when he saw me, his hand going to his pocket as if he was reaching for a weapon. "Jesus is Dom," he breathed, letting out a shaky breath. "You scared me. You should call before you come over." I looked at him calmly. "I own the house, Tyrell. I do not need to call." He wiped sweat from his forehead. Right. Look, I am glad you are here. We need to talk about the allowance. 5,000 isn't enough. We have expenses. Medical bills. He was lying. The medical bills were covered by my insurance. He needed money for the sharks. I walked over to the kitchen island and set the leather portfolio down with a heavy thud. I know, I said. That is why I am here. I have been doing a lot of thinking, Tyrell. About us. About the baby. Tyrell stopped pacing. He looked at the portfolio, then at me. What kind of thinking, he asked wearily. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of acting ability I possessed. I want to make this work, I said. I want to be a family again. But I need security. And I know you need security too. You are worried about your future. You are worried that I might change my mind and cut you off. Tyrell nodded slowly. Yeah, I am. You have all the power, Dom. It isn't fair. I unzipped the portfolio. So I had my lawyer draw this up, I said. It is a post-nuptial agreement. An amendment to our original contract. Tyrell took a step back, crossing his arms. I am not signing anything, he said. I know your tricks. You are trying to screw me out of my share. I shook my head. Read it, Tyrell. It is generous. Extremely generous. I opened the document to the summary page. Here is the offer, I said, pointing to the figures. Upon the birth of the child, I will deposit $1 million into a trust fund for the baby. And I will deposit $500,000 into a joint account for us to use for household expenses. Tyrell's eyes bulged. $500,000. But I continued, pulling a check from my pocket. I know you have immediate needs, things to prepare, debts to clear, so we can start fresh. I placed the check on the counter. It was made out to Tyrell Sterling for $50,000. This is a signing bonus, I said. Cashable today. Immediate funds. Tyrell stared at the check. I could see the gears turning in his head. $50,000 was exactly what the loan sharks were demanding by sunset. It would buy him another month of life. It would save his kneecaps. He reached for the check, but I placed my hand over it. You have to sign the agreement first, I said softly. Tyrell looked at the document. He flipped through the pages. It was dense with legalese. He looked at the check again. The greed and the fear were warring in his eyes. What is the catch, he asked. No catch, I said. It just formalizes our arrangement. It states that I acknowledge the child as part of the family and agree to support it. And it states that you agree to stop the divorce proceedings and return to the marriage. I flipped to page 14, and this section, I said, pointing to a paragraph of dense text, simply protects us from outside claims. It ensures that the money stays in the family. Tyrell didn't read it. He glanced at the words irrevocable and beneficiary, but his eyes kept darting back to the check under my hand. He was sweating profusely now. He checked his watch. It was noon. The bank closed at 5. The sharks were coming at 6. Give me a pen, he said. Are you sure, I asked, pretending to be hesitant. You should probably have a lawyer look at it. I don't have time for a lawyer, he snapped. Snatching a pen from the cup on the counter. I trust you, Dom. You want the baby to be secure, right? So do I. He bent over the document. He signed his name on the first page, then the second. I watched him. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a dark exhilaration. He was signing page 14. He did not read paragraph 7, subsection C, the paternity fraud clause. It was written in standard legal English, but its meaning was deadly. It stated that all financial promises, all trust funds, and all spousal support were contingent upon the genetic validity of the child's paternity. It stated that if the child was proven via DNA testing not to be the biological offspring of Tyrell Sterling, then the agreement was void. But it went further. Subsection D stated that in the event of paternity fraud, the signatory, aka Tyrell, agreed to assume full legal liability for all marital debts, including the mortgage on the penthouse and any outstanding loans. And most importantly, it stated that he forfeited all claims to marital assets past, present, and future. He was signing his death warrant. By signing this document, he was legally agreeing that if the baby wasn't his, he would leave the marriage with absolutely nothing but the debt on his back. And he knew the baby wasn't his. Or at least he knew it was a lie. But he was so arrogant, so sure that his secret was safe, that he didn't think the clause mattered. He thought I would never find out. He thought he could trick the system. He scribbled his signature on the final page. Done, he said, straightening up. He reached for the check. I lifted my hand. Thank you, Tyrell, I said. I am glad we are on the same page. He grabbed the check and kissed it. You are a lifesaver, Dom, he said. You really are. I am going to run to the bank. I have some vendors to pay. For the nursery. I nodded. Go ahead. I will file this with the court on Monday. Tyrell grabbed his coat and ran out the door. He didn't even say goodbye. He was racing to save his skin. I stood in the kitchen listening to his car roar down the driveway. I picked up the signed document. The ink was still wet. I walked over to the window and looked out at the frozen lake. You just sold your soul for $50,000, Tyrell, I whispered. And the best part is, you don't even own the soul you just sold. Jasmine walked into the room a moment later. She had been hiding in the bedroom listening. What did he sign? She asked, eyeing the portfolio. Just some paperwork for the trust fund, I said, closing the leather cover. We are going to take care of you, Jasmine. Everything is going to be taken care of. Jasmine smiled, rubbing her belly. That is good, Dom. I knew you would come around. Family is everything, right? Right, I said, fighting the urge to vomit. Family is everything. I left the lake house 10 minutes later. I drove straight to Evelyn Vance's office. When I handed her the document, she adjusted her glasses and looked at the signature. He signed it, she asked incredulously. He didn't even try to negotiate the paternity clause. He didn't even read it, I said. He was in a rush. Evelyn closed the file and sat back in her chair. A look of professional admiration crossed her face. Dominique, she said. I have been a lawyer for 20 years. I have seen men lose fortunes because of bad investments. I have seen men lose houses because of bad divorces. But I have never seen a man voluntarily sign a document that effectively ends his life. When you trigger this clause, when you reveal the DNA results, he will be homeless. I finished for her. He will be liable for the millions of dollars in mortgage debt on the penthouse, which implies he will have to declare bankruptcy immediately. And since the agreement waives his right to spousal support, he will be on the street. Evelyn nodded. And with the fraud element, we can likely push for criminal charges if we want to. Signing a contract under false pretenses involving this amount of money is fraud. I stood up and walked to the window of her high-rise office. One step at a time, Evelyn, I said. First we break his heart, then we break his bank account, then we let the law finish the rest. I checked my phone. It was Friday afternoon. The baby shower was on Sunday. I had the DNA sample from the pastor. I had the signed confession from Tyrell in the form of this contract. The only thing missing was the baby's DNA. And tomorrow was Jasmine's prenatal checkup. I pulled out my phone and called Dr. Alcott. He answered on the private line. Dominique, he said. It is good to hear from you. How is the art world? It is cutthroat, as always, doctor, I said. But I am calling about a different kind of art. I am calling about a paternity test. I need a favor. A big one. There was a silence on the line. Is this about your sister? He asked. Yes, I said. She is coming in tomorrow. I need you to run a non-invasive prenatal paternity test. I have the alleged father's sample. I will bring it to the lab in the morning. Dominique, you know I can't do that without the mother's consent, Dr. Alcott said. It is unethical. It is illegal. I paused. I knew this was the hardest part. Doctor, I said, my voice low and serious. Last year you asked me to appraise that Monet in your study. I told you it was worth $3 million. But I also told you that the provenance papers had a gap in 1942. A gap that could suggest it was looted art. I heard his breath hitch. I never filed the official report on the gap, I continued. I let it slide because we are friends, because I know you bought it in good faith. But if that report were to be filed, if the art loss register were to be notified, you would lose the painting, I said, and your reputation would be destroyed. Blackmail is an ugly word. I preferred to think of it as leverage. I will have the lab tech ready. Dr. Alcott said, his voice tight. Bring the sample by 8 a.m. We will tell Jasmine it is a routine blood draw for iron levels. Thank you, doctor, I said. You are a true friend. I hung up the phone. I felt a twinge of guilt. But I crushed it instantly. They had started this war. They had brought the mud into my house. Now I was just playing in it. I had the trap. I had the bait. And now, I had the lock. Tyrell was safe for tonight. He had paid his sharks. He was probably celebrating right now, drinking champagne and feeling like a genius. Let him celebrate. Let him sleep soundly. Because on Sunday he was going to wake up in a nightmare that he had signed his own name to. They say that revenge is a dish best served cold, but I have always believed that presentation is everything. If you are going to serve a dish of absolute destruction, you should plate it on fine china and garnish it with diamonds. I did not just want to expose my family. I wanted to dismantle them in a setting so beautiful and so public that the contrast would leave a scar on Chicago society for a decade. The baby shower was not just a party. It was a production. I treated it like an art auction. Every detail was calculated to increase the value of the final reveal. I hired the most expensive event planner in the city, a woman named Sarah Fina, who usually planned weddings for royalty and bar mitzvahs for billionaires. When I told her the budget was unlimited, she nearly fainted. I want a winter wonderland theme, I told her. I want the ballroom of the Drake Hotel to look like a frozen palace. White roses, crystal icicles, silver linens. I want it to look pure. The irony was not lost on me. I was creating a sanctuary of purity for a baby conceived in sin and greed. For the next 48 hours, I became the perfect sister. I was a whirlwind of benevolence. I sent out invitations printed on heavy cardstock with gold leaf lettering. I did not just invite family and friends. I invited the power players of Chicago, the board members of the auction house, the partners at Ethan's architecture firm, the local alderman who owed me a favor, and most importantly, I invited the press. I called the editor of the Chicago Socialite, a glossy magazine that covered the lives of the rich and scandalous. I told her that I was hosting an exclusive event to celebrate my family's miracle, and that I wanted her photographer there to capture the moment of unity. She agreed instantly. Tyrell and Jasmine loved attention. They would preen for the cameras thinking they were celebrities. They wouldn't realize they were just documenting their own downfall. My mother Bernice was in her element. She had taken credit for the reconciliation just as I knew she would. She spent the entire day Saturday calling every member of the church directory. I could hear her voice booming over the phone when I stopped by her house to drop off a dress I had bought for her. "Oh yes, Sister Patterson. It is a miracle," Bernice crowed into the receiver. "God has blessed the Sterling line. Dominique has been so gracious. She understands that the Lord works in mysterious ways. You simply must come to the shower. We are going to have a special prayer of dedication." She hung up and looked at me beaming. "You have made me very proud, Dominique," she said, patting my cheek. "You finally put your pride aside. This baby is going to heal this family." I smiled at her. It was a tight, frozen smile. "I think this baby is going to reveal the truth about this family, Mother," I said. Bernice didn't catch the double meaning. She was too busy admiring the sequined gown I had brought her. "And Pastor Jenkins," she asked. "Is he coming?" "Oh yes," I said. I personally delivered the invitation to the rectory. I told him that since he has been such a spiritual guide to Jasmine, it would mean the world to us if he offered the opening blessing. Bernice clasped her hands together. Wonderful. Just wonderful. A holy start for a holy child. I left her house feeling a deep, dark satisfaction. Pastor Jenkins had looked terrified when I handed him the envelope, but he couldn't say no. Not with the donation check I had just given him. Not with his biggest supporter Bernice insisting on his presence. He was trapped by his own greed and his own image. But the centerpiece of my plan was not the flowers or the guest list. It was the gift. Traditionally, the aunt gives a crib or a stroller. I decided to give something more lasting. I went to the studio of Julian Vance, a young avant-garde painter I had discovered a few years ago. He was talented, hungry, and owed me for getting him into his first gallery show. "I need a commission, Julian," I told him standing in his paint-splattered loft. "And I need it in 24 hours. He wiped his hands on a rag. "That is impossible, Dominique. Oil takes weeks to dry. Use acrylics," I said. "Use a hairdryer. I don't care about the archival quality. I care about the image." I pulled out a photo of Tyrell. It was a headshot he had taken for his life coaching website where he tried to look wise and trustworthy. "I want you to paint a classic scene," I said. "The Kiss of Judas. You know the one. Where Judas betrays Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Julian nodded. Caravaggio style. Heavy shadows. Dramatic light. Exactly, I said. But I want you to make a specific adjustment. I want Judas to have this face. I handed him the photo of Tyrell. And I want the figure of Jesus to be faceless, I continued. Or better yet, make him look like a shadow. Like a ghost. Because the person he betrayed isn't a Messiah. It is me. And I am already a ghost to him. Julian looked at the photo, then at me. He saw the cold fire in my eyes. He didn't ask questions. He just named a price. Triple it, I said. Just have it framed and delivered to the Drake Hotel by Sunday morning. Cover it in a velvet cloth. It will be the grand finale. While I was curating the artistic side of the execution, Ethan was handling the forensic side. I met him at his office late Saturday night. The building was empty. Ethan had bags under his eyes, but he was clean-shaven and wearing a crisp suit. He looked like the architect he was born to be. Precise, structured, and unyielding. He had 3 binders on his desk. They were thick red binders labeled strictly confidential. Binder 1. Ethan said, tapping the cover. The embezzlement. I have traced every single check Jasmine wrote to Tyrell. I have the digital signatures. I have the IP addresses. I even have the surveillance footage from the bank where Tyrell cashed them. It is indisputable proof of theft and conspiracy to commit fraud. Binder 2, he continued. The tax evasion. Tyrell hasn't filed taxes in 3 years. And Jasmine claimed him as a dependent on her returns illegally. The IRS is going to have a field day with this. And Binder 3? I asked, pointing to the thickest one. Ethan smiled grimly. This is the police report, he said. I haven't filed it yet. I have it filled out, ready to go. Grand larceny. Corporate theft. Fraud. Once we hand this to the detectives outside the ballroom, the party is over. Detectives, I asked, raising an eyebrow. Ethan nodded. I called a friend in the Economic Crimes Division. He agreed to have 2 officers in plain clothes waiting in the lobby. They won't come in until we give the signal. He said if the amount is over $100,000, which it is, they are happy to make an arrest on a Sunday. Excellent, I said, running my hand over the cool plastic of the binder. I looked at Ethan. Are you ready for this? I asked. Tomorrow is going to be brutal. You are going to watch the woman you loved be destroyed. Ethan looked out the window. The woman I loved died the moment she slept with your husband Dom, he said. The woman walking into that ballroom tomorrow is a stranger. A stranger who stole my future. I am not destroying her. I am just holding the mirror while she destroys herself. We stood there for a moment, 2 soldiers on the eve of battle. Go home and sleep, Ethan, I said. You need to look sharp tomorrow. You are the grieving fiancé who discovers the truth. The jury needs to sympathize with you. What about you? He asked. I picked up my purse. I am the villain, remember I said. Villains don't sleep. We plot. I drove home to my penthouse. It felt empty without Tyrell's clutter, but it also felt clean. I walked into the master bedroom. I opened the safe. I took out the medical report proving Tyrell's sterility. I took out the post-nuptial agreement Tyrell had signed yesterday. I took out the DNA test results from Dr. Alcott. I had picked them up that afternoon. The doctor had been true to his word. He had rushed the sample. I opened the envelope one last time just to look at the numbers. Probability of paternity for Tyrell's sterling 0%. Probability of paternity for Marcus Jenkins 99.9%. It was scientific perfection. I placed the 3 documents into a sleek silver envelope. This was my speech. This was my toast. My phone rang. It was Tyrell. Hey babe. His voice was loud and cheerful. I could hear music in the background. He was probably spending the $50,000 I had given him. Hello Tyrell, I said. Are you ready for tomorrow? Born ready, he said. Jasmine is excited. She found a dress that shows off the bump. We are going to look like $1 million, Dom. I smiled at my reflection in the mirror. You certainly are Tyrell, I said. Make sure you wear that blue tie I bought you. It looks good on camera. Oh yeah, the press is coming, right? He asked. Everyone is coming, I said. It is going to be the event of the season. I love you, Dom, he said. Thanks for stepping up. You are a real one. I love the truth, Tyrell, I replied. I hung up. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the years I had tried to be enough. Enough for my mother. Enough for my husband. Enough for my sister. I had worked myself into the ground. I had bought their love with trips and cars and tuition. And in return they had given me nothing but lies. Tomorrow the transaction was over. Tomorrow I was closing the account. I closed my eyes and visualized the ballroom. I visualized the moment I would stand at the podium. I visualized the look on Pastor Jenkins' face when I read the DNA results. I visualized the look on Tyrell's face when I pulled out the contract. It wasn't a baby shower. It was a funeral for their deception, and I was the one delivering the eulogy. Sleep tight, Chicago. The storm is coming. Sunday arrived wrapped in a coat of ice and brilliance, just like the woman who had orchestrated it. The Gold Coast Ballroom at the Drake Hotel had been transformed into a winter sanctuary exactly as I had requested. Crystal chandeliers dripped with extra strands of diamonds that I had rented for the occasion. Thousands of white hydrangeas and lilies filled the air with a scent that was suffocatingly sweet. It smelled like a wedding. It smelled like a funeral. To me, those two things were often the same. I arrived early wearing a dress of steel gray silk. It was a severe color, a sharp contrast to the soft pastels and whites that the rest of the family would be wearing. I stood on the balcony, overlooking the ballroom, watching the staff put the finishing touches on the stage. There was a massive screen behind the podium, currently displaying a looped image of a stork, carrying a bundle with the words, "The Sterling Legacy," written in gold script. Legacy. That word was about to take on a whole new meaning. Ethan stood beside me. He looked sharp in a black suit, his face composed into a mask of polite grief. He had practiced his role well. Today he was the tragic exfiance, the man who had been cast aside for a miracle. He held the remote control for the presentation in his pocket. His thumb traced the buttons nervously. "Are you sure about the timing?" he asked, quietly watching the waiters set up the champagne tower. I checked my watch. The Patek Philippe that Tyrell had tried to steal. "Absolute certainty," I said. "We let them get comfortable. We let them drink the vintage Dom Perignon. We let the press take their photos. We wait until the room is at maximum capacity. Then we strike." The guests began to arrive at 1 o'clock. First came the church crowd. The deacons in their Sunday best, the choir members whispering excitedly about the extravagance of the party. Then came my mother Bernice. She entered the room like she was the Queen of England. She was wearing the sequined gown I had bought her, and a hat so large it practically had its own zip code. She was greeting everyone, shaking hands, accepting congratulations as if she herself had conceived the child through divine intervention. Then came the guests of honor. Jasmine and Tyrell made an entrance that would have made a Kardashian jealous. Jasmine wore a form-fitting white dress that accentuated her baby bump. She looked glowing. She looked innocent. She looked like the Madonna. Tyrell walked beside her wearing the blue tie I had selected. He had his hand on the small of her back, guiding her protectively. He was beaming. He waved to the photographers from the Chicago Socialite, flashing that charming smile that had once fooled me. They looked happy. They looked successful. They looked like a couple who had won the lottery, and in their minds they had. They had secured the bag. They had secured the house. They had secured the future. I walked down the grand staircase to greet them. The crowd parted for me. I could hear the whispers. "There she is. The sister. So generous. So forgiving." Dominique, Tyrell said, pulling me into a hug. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. "This is incredible. You really outdid yourself, babe." I pulled back, smiling my cold appraisal smile. "Nothing but the best for family, Tyrell," I said. Jasmine squeezed my hand. Her palms were sweaty despite the cool air in the room. "Thank you, Dom," she whispered. "This is a dream come true." I looked at her belly. The belly that held the secret that was about to destroy her life. "Enjoy it, Jasmine," I said. "You deserve every moment of this spotlight." I watched them circulate the room. I watched Tyrell laughing with my business partners, shaking hands with the bankers he owed money to. Oblivious to the fact that they were looking at him with pity, not admiration. I watched Jasmine holding court with the church ladies, accepting onesies and silver rattles. And I watched Pastor Jenkins. He was standing near the buffet eating shrimp. He looked nervous. He kept glancing at Jasmine, then at Tyrell, then at the door. He was sweating. He knew the risks of this game better than anyone. When I approached him, he nearly jumped out of his skin. "Pastor," I said smoothly. "I am so glad you came." "Dominique," he said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "A lovely event. Truly lovely. The Lord is surely in this place." I nodded. "He certainly is, Pastor. The truth always finds a way to the light, doesn't it?" He laughed nervously. "Amen. Amen." By 2:30 the ballroom was packed. 300 people. The cream of Chicago society. The champagne was flowing. The jazz band was playing soft, upbeat tunes. The atmosphere was electric with celebration. It was time. I signaled the band leader. The music stopped. A hush fell over the room. I walked up the steps to the stage. The spotlight hit me blindingly bright. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Tyrell and Jasmine standing in the front row holding hands. I saw my mother dabbling her eyes with a handkerchief. I saw Pastor Jenkins trying to blend into a pillar. I saw the detectives in plain clothes standing by the exit doors. And I saw Ethan standing by the audio-visual booth, his hand on the laptop. I took a deep breath. "Welcome, everyone." I began, my voice ringing clear and steady through the hall. "Thank you for joining us on this joyous winter afternoon. We are here to celebrate life. We are here to celebrate love. And we are here to celebrate the miraculous expansion of the Sterling family." A pause broke out. Tyrell waved to the crowd. Jasmine did a little curtsy. "My sister Jasmine and my husband Tyrell have given us a surprise that none of us expected," I continued. "A baby. A blessing. My mother calls it a miracle. And, indeed, it is rare." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "But today, I want to give them a gift in return. I am an appraiser by trade. My job is to look at a beautiful object and determine its true nature. To look past the paint and the polish and find the authenticity underneath. Because without truth, beauty is just a lie." I saw Tyrell frown slightly. The word lie hung in the air a little too long. "So, I have prepared a special presentation," I said. "A collection of memories. A digital scrapbook, if you will. To honor the journey that brought us to this moment. To honor the true cost of this miracle." I gestured to the massive screen behind me. "Please turn your attention to the screen." The lights dimmed. The room went dark. Soft piano music began to play. It was a sentimental tune, the kind used in diaper commercials. The first image appeared. It was a photo of Jasmine as a baby, cute and smiling. The crowd cooed. Then a photo of Tyrell and me at our wedding. A few people clapped politely. Then a photo of the ultrasound. The baby. The miracle. Then the screen flickered. It wasn't a technical glitch. It was a transition effect. A jagged static distortion that cut through the sentimental music. The music stopped abruptly, replaced by the jarring sound of a text message notification sound, amplified to a deafening volume. Ding. A text message appeared on the screen. Enormous letters white against a black background. Sender, Lone Shark Tony. Message. "You have 24 hours. Tyrell. Pay the $50K interest, or we take a kneecap. We know where your wife works." A gasp went through the room. A collective intake of breath that sounded like all the oxygen being sucked out of the ballroom. Tyrell stood up. He looked confused. He looked around as if this was a prank. Another sound. Ding. Another text message. "Sender Tyrell. Message. I am working on it, Tony. My wife is a cash cow. I just need to get her to sign the settlement. I am using the sister to get to the money. Just give me a week." The silence was shattered. People started whispering. I heard my mother say, "What is this?" loudly. But the video wasn't done. The pace accelerated. Ding. Sender Tyrell. Message. She bought the pregnancy story. She thinks it is a miracle. Dumb rich bitch. As soon as I get the alimony, we are gone. Tyrell was shouting now. "Turn it off. Turn it off. There is a mistake." He lunged toward the stage, but the security guards I had hired stepped out of the shadows, blocking his path. I stood at the podium, unmoving, a statue of judgment. The video shifted. The background color changed from black to red. A new notification sound. A softer, more intimate chime. Ding. Sender Jasmine. Message. I hate sleeping with him. He smells like cheap bourbon. I wish I was with you at the rectory. Jasmine screamed. A high-pitched shriek of terror. Ding. Sender Jasmine. Message Pastor. I need more money. Tyrell is in deep. If you don't wire the 10 grand, I am going to tell Sister Margaret about our counseling sessions and about the baby. The room erupted. It wasn't whispers anymore. It was chaos. Chairs scraped against the floor as people stood up to get a better view. Phones were out recording everything. The flashbulbs from the press were blinding, popping like strobe lights. Pastor Jenkins tried to run. He turned toward the side exit, but he bumped into a waiter sending a tray of champagne crashing to the floor. The sound of breaking glass was perfect. The screen continued its relentless assault. Photo. A bank transfer receipt. $10,000 from Greater Grace Tabernacle Building Fund to Jasmine Sterling. Photo. A handwritten ledger. Gambling debts totaling $500,000. Photo. A screenshot of my vintage Chanel bag on eBay, listed by Tyrell. Then the music returned. But it wasn't the sentimental piano anymore. It was the recording I had made in the lake house. Tyrell's voice booming through the speakers. Who is she going to believe us, or her own paranoia? She is weak. We got the house, baby. We got the money. Tyrell was frozen. He stood in the center of the ballroom, illuminated by the light of his own sins projected on the screen 20 feet high. He looked small. He looked naked. Jasmine was sobbing, clutching her stomach. Her mascara running down her face in black rivers. She looked at Tyrell, then at the screen, then at the crowd. There was nowhere to hide. I leaned into the microphone. My voice was calm, cold, and amplified to fill every corner of the room. We welcome the truth, I said. I signaled Ethan. The screen went black for a second. Then a single document appeared. The DNA test result. Dr. Alcott's signature was visible at the bottom. The seal of the lab was official. The text was zoomed in. Alleged father Tyrell Sterling. Probability of paternity 0%. Conclusion excluded. Tyrell stared at the screen. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He turned to Jasmine. The look on his face was a mixture of shock and murderous rage. It's not mine. He screamed. His voice cracked. You told me it was mine. You swore on the Bible. Jasmine shrank back, terrified of him. And then the second document appeared. Alleged father Marcus Jenkins. Probability of paternity. 99.99%. Conclusion. Inclusion. The entire ballroom turned to look at Pastor Jenkins. He was backed against the wall, shaking, trembling, his silk vest stained with sweat. His wife, Sister Margaret, was standing next to him, staring at him with a look of absolute horror. She raised her hand and slapped him. The sound was loud enough to be heard over the chaos. Liar! She screamed. You dirty old liar. My mother. Bernice fainted. She didn't glide to the floor gracefully. She collapsed like a sack of potatoes hitting the carpet with a thud. No one moved to help her immediately. They were too busy watching the carnage. I watched Tyrell. He was looking at the DNA results, and I saw the moment the realization hit him. He remembered the contract. He remembered the post-nuptial agreement he had signed on Friday. The one with the paternity fraud clause. The one that made him liable for everything. He looked up at me on the stage. Our eyes locked. I held up the silver envelope containing the signed contract. I waved it gently. Checkmate, Tyrell, I whispered, though I knew he couldn't hear me. He roared. It was a sound of pure animal desperation. He turned and tried to run, not toward me, but toward the exit. He knew he had to get out. He knew the loan sharks were watching. He knew the police were watching, but he didn't make it to the door. The two detectives in plain clothes stepped forward. They blocked his path. One of them pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The metal glinted under the chandeliers. Tyrell Sterling, one of them said loud enough for the press to hear. You are under arrest for grand larceny, fraud, and embezzlement. Tyrell tried to fight. He threw a punch, but he was a failed athlete, not a fighter. The detective slammed him against the wall of the ballroom, right next to a vase of white hydrangeas. The vase tipped over, crashing to the floor, spilling water and flowers everywhere. Jasmine was sitting on the floor now, weeping into her hands. Ethan walked over to her. He stood over her, looking down. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just dropped the red binder labeled embezzlement onto her lap. "You might want to read this," he said calmly. "Your lawyer will need it." I stood on the stage watching the tableau, my husband in handcuffs, my sister destroyed, my mother unconscious, the pastor being beaten by his wife with a purse. The flashbulbs kept popping, capturing every second of the destruction. I took a sip of water from the glass on the podium. "The truth," I said into the microphone one last time, "is a very expensive gift, but I think it was worth every penny." I turned and walked off the stage, leaving them in the ruins of their own making. The party was over, but my life was just beginning. The ballroom was a powder keg, and I had just lit the match. The images on the screen were still cycling, showing the text messages, the gambling debts, and the undeniable proof of their conspiracy. The sound of Jasmine's voice from the hidden recording echoed off the crystal chandeliers, filling the room with the raw, ugly sound of her betrayal. Tyrell finally snapped. The shock that had frozen him in place shattered, and was replaced by a feral, animalistic rage. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at his pregnant mistress. He looked at me. He looked at the woman standing on the podium, holding his life in her hands, and he decided that if he was going down, he was taking me with him. "Turn it off," he screamed, his voice cracking under the strain. He lunged forward, scrambling up the steps of the stage. "You are a liar, Dominique. This is fake. All of it is fake." The crowd gasped, pulling back as he charged. My mother, Bernice, who had just started to stir from her faint, let out a weak cry. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink, even. I had paid $50,000 for security for this exact moment. Before Tyrell could get within 5 feet of me, 2 massive guards stepped out from behind the heavy velvet curtains. One of them caught Tyrell by the shoulder, spinning him around like a rag doll. The other grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back. Tyrell struggled, kicking and spitting, foaming at the mouth with desperation. "Let me go," he roared. "She is lying. Tell them you are lying, Dominique. Tell them the baby is mine." I signaled to the tech booth. The music stopped. The video loop on the screen paused. The room fell into a silence, so profound. I could hear the hum of the projector fan and the heavy, ragged breathing of my husband. I stepped closer to the edge of the stage, looking down at him. He was on his knees now, forced down by the guards, but his eyes were still burning with defiance. "You want the truth, Tyrell?" I asked. My voice amplified and calm. "You want to talk about lies? You have built your entire identity on a lie. You told everyone you were a basketball star who lost his career to a knee injury. You told everyone you were a man who could give this family an heir." I opened the silver envelope in my hand. I pulled out the medical file I had retrieved from the archives. "Let us look at the record," I said. I nodded to Ethan. He hit a key on the laptop. The screen behind me changed. It was no longer the text messages. It was a blown-up high-resolution image of the surgical report from Northwestern Memorial Hospital, dated November 14, 2018. I turned to the screen, pointing at the highlighted text. "This is the surgical summary from your accident, Tyrell," I read aloud. "But it wasn't your knee, was it? It says here bilateral testicular rupture due to blunt force trauma." I heard a murmur ripple through the crowd. Men in the audience winced sympathetically. But I wasn't done. I read the next line. My voice heart is steel. Diagnosis, azoospermia. Prognosis, irreversible sterility. I turned back to look at Tyrell. "You have been sterile for 5 years, Tyrell. You cannot have children. You have 0 sperm count. It is biologically impossible for you to be the father of that baby." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of 100 egos shattering at once. Tyrell stopped struggling. He went limp in the guard's grip. His face turned an ashy gray color. The defiance was gone, replaced by a hollow look of total emasculation. He knew the truth. He had always known. He had just hoped that his lie was strong enough to rewrite biology. My mother, Bernice, let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. She sat up on the floor, her expensive hat askew, clutching her chest. "No," she sobbed. "No. It is a miracle. God healed him." "You said God healed him." I looked at my mother with pity. "God deals in truth, Mother," I said. "Not in fraud." I turned my gaze to Jasmine. She was still sitting on the floor where she had collapsed earlier. She was shaking violently, her hands covering her face. She knew what was coming next. She knew that the shield of Tyrell's paternity had just been vaporized. So I continued pacing the stage like a prosecutor in a closing argument. If Tyrell is not the father, then who is? I looked at Ethan. He was standing by the tech booth, his face grim. Some of you might think it is Ethan, I said. The loyal fiancé, the man Jasmine betrayed. But no, Ethan has too much self-respect to sleep with a woman who steals from his company. I walked to the center of the stage. You see, Jasmine didn't just want a baby. She wanted insurance. She wanted a golden ticket. She needed someone with money, someone with power, and someone who had a reputation to protect. Someone who would pay anything to keep a secret. I looked directly at the VIP table near the front. The table where the church leadership sat. Pastor Jenkins was trying to stand up. He was pale, sweating, profusely dabbing his forehead with his monogrammed handkerchief. He looked like a rat trapped in a maze that had suddenly caught fire. I signaled Ethan one last time. The screen changed. This document, I said, pointing to the projection, was obtained through a prenatal paternity test. We acquired the sample from the mother during a routine checkup where she thought she was getting blood work done. And we matched it against a DNA sample acquired from a coffee cup left in my office 3 days ago. The text on the screen was massive. There was no misinterpreting it. Probability of paternity for Marcus Jenkins 99.99%. The gasp that went through the room this time wasn't just shock. It was scandal. It was the sound of a community's moral foundation crumbling into dust. Pastor Jenkins, the man who preached about the sanctity of the family. The man who condemned adultery from the pulpit every Sunday. The man my mother worshipped as a saint. He was the father of her daughter's baby. Sister Margaret, the pastor's wife, stood up slowly. She was a dignified woman who had spent 40 years standing in her husband's shadow. She looked at the screen. She looked at the numbers. Then she looked at her husband. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply picked up her purse, opened it, and took out a heavy metal thermos she used for tea. And she swung it. She struck Pastor Jenkins across the face with a force that echoed through the silent ballroom. "You devil," she hissed, her voice trembling with decades of suppressed rage. "You dirty, hypocritical devil." Jenkins stumbled back, holding his face, blood trickling from his lip. He looked around wildly, realizing there was no escape. The doors were blocked by the press, who were snapping photos furiously. The congregation members were looking at him with disgust. But the most satisfying reaction was Tyrell's. I looked down at my husband, who was still on his knees. He was staring at the screen, reading the name Marcus Jenkins over and over again. His brain was trying to process the double cross. He had agreed to raise another man's child to get my money. He thought he was the mastermind. He thought Jasmine was his partner in crime. But Jasmine hadn't just used him to get to me, she had used him to hide the pastor. Tyrell realized that the money he was extorting, the $10,000 Jasmine had demanded on the phone, wasn't coming from a bank. It was coming from the man who was sleeping with his wife. He had been pimping out his own wife to the pastor to pay his gambling debts. The realization broke him. He let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a roar of pure humiliation. "You knew," he screamed at Jasmine, spit flying from his lips. "You knew it was him. You let me think I was a king, and you were sleeping with the preacher." He tried to lunge at Jasmine, dragging the guards with him. "I signed the contract," he shouted, tears streaming down his face. "I signed the postnup. I took the debt for a baby that isn't mine." I smiled. He remembered. "That is right, Tyrell," I said into the microphone, ensuring everyone heard. "You signed a contract stating that if you lied about paternity, you accept full liability for all marital debts. You just agreed to pay back every cent you stole, plus the mortgage on the penthouse, plus your gambling loans. And since you have no assets and no job and no reproductive future, I suggest you start looking for a very good public defender." Tyrell collapsed, weeping, into the carpet. He was a broken man, stripped of his money, his pride, and his freedom. Jasmine looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Dom, please," she sobbed. "I had to do it. He made me. The pastor said it was God's will. He said I was special." I looked down at her coldly. "You are special, Jasmine," I said. "You are the only person I know who managed to destroy 3 families in 9 months. That takes talent." I looked at the detective standing by the door. I nodded. Officers, I said. I think you have enough evidence now. The detectives moved in. They pulled Tyrell to his feet, cuffing his hands behind his back. He didn't fight anymore. He just hung his head sobbing. Another officer walked over to Jasmine. Jasmine Sterling, he said, helping her up. You are under arrest for embezzlement and corporate fraud. We have the warrant. But I am pregnant, she wailed, clutching her belly. You can't arrest a pregnant woman. We have a medical unit at the station, the officer said impassively. Let's go. As they dragged my family away, the flashbulbs exploded like fireworks. It was the perfect finale to the perfect show. I looked at my mother Bernice, who was sitting on the floor staring blankly at the wall. Her world had ended. Her golden child was a criminal. Her spiritual leader was an adulterer. Her son-in-law was a fraud. She looked up at me. Her eyes were empty. Dominique, she whispered, what have you done? I walked down the steps of the stage, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I knelt down so I was eye level with her. I didn't do anything, Mother, I said softly. I just turned on the lights. You are the one who filled the room with monsters. I stood up and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for me, staring with a mixture of fear and awe. I didn't look back. I walked past the weeping pastor. I walked past the screaming Tyrell. I walked past the sobbing Jasmine. I walked out of the ballroom and into the lobby where the winter sun was streaming through the glass doors. It was cold outside, but for the first time in years I felt warm. I felt light. I took a deep breath of the crisp air. The Sterling family legacy was dead. Long lived the truth. You would think that seeing your husband in handcuffs and your sister weeping on the floor would evoke some sense of pity, some flicker of humanity. But as I stood on that stage, looking down at the wreckage of my family, I felt nothing but a cool clinical satisfaction. It was the same feeling I got when I identified a fake painting. The forgery had been exposed. The fraud had been removed from the market, and now it was time to settle the bill. Tyrell was not going quietly. Even as the detective tightened the cuffs around his wrists, he was screaming about his rights. He was twisting his body, trying to face the crowd, trying to salvage some shred of his narrative. This is illegal, he bellowed, his voice cracking with desperation. This is marital property. Half of everything is mine. You can't just kick me out, Dominique. I know the law. Illinois is an equitable distribution state. I get half the penthouse. I get half the accounts. I get half of everything. He looked at me, his eyes bulging with a mixture of fear and entitlement. You hear me, Dominique, he shouted. You can humiliate me, but you have to pay me. I am going to sue you for every dime you have. I will take the art collection. I will take the cars. I will take the building. I walked slowly to the edge of the stage. The silver envelope was still in my hand. I tapped it gently against the palm of my other hand. The sound was soft, but in the silent ballroom, it sounded like a judge's gavel. I waited until he stopped screaming. I waited until the only sound in the room was the shutter of camera lenses and Jasmine's muffled sobs. You are right, Tyrell, I said into the microphone. Illinois is an equitable distribution state. Usually I pulled the contract out of the envelope. I held it up so the light caught the signature on the bottom page. But you seem to have forgotten our little meeting on Friday. You seem to have forgotten the document you signed in exchange for that $50,000 check. Tyrell froze. I saw the memory flash behind his eyes. He had signed it so fast. He had been so desperate to pay the loan sharks that he hadn't read a single word. I unfolded the document. This is a binding post-nuptial agreement. I explained, my voice calm and deadly. And right here in Section 4 Paragraph C is the paternity fraud clause. I looked out at the audience, ensuring the press was getting every word. It states clearly that all financial support, all asset division, and all spousal privileges are contingent upon the biological validity of the child you claimed was yours. It states that if you are found to have knowingly or unknowingly misrepresented paternity, you forfeit all rights to marital assets. Tyrell's face went white. All rights, I repeated. That means you get 0% of the penthouse, 0% of the accounts, 0% of my retirement fund. You leave this marriage with exactly what you brought into it, which, if I recall correctly, was a gym bag full of dirty clothes and a mountain of debt. But I wasn't finished. I wanted to twist the knife. And there is one more thing, Tyrell, I said, pretending to read the fine print. Section 5. Assumption of liability. By signing this, you agree that in the event of fraud, you assume full legal responsibility for all debts incurred during the marriage. That includes the mortgage. That includes the credit cards. And that includes any personal loans you may have taken out. Tyrell stopped struggling. He slumped against the wall, held up only by the detective's grip. You tricked me, he whispered. I didn't trick you. I said, cold as ice. I gave you a contract. You chose not to read it because you were too busy counting money that wasn't yours. That is not fraud, Tyrell. That is stupidity. I walked down the stairs of the stage and approached him. I stopped just out of spitting distance. And speaking of money, I said, lowering my voice so only he in the front row could hear, I know you were counting on that $50,000 check I gave you on Friday to pay off Tony and his friends. Tyrell looked up at me, hope flickering in his eyes. He still had the check. It was in his pocket. I pulled out my phone. I stopped payment on that check 10 minutes ago, I said. The hope vanished. It was replaced by a terror so raw it was almost hard to watch. Tony gave you 24 hours, I said, checking my watch. That was Friday. It is now Sunday. You are 48 hours late, Tyrell. And now you are going to jail with no money and a very angry loan shark waiting for you on the outside. Good luck with your kneecaps, husband. Tyrell let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. He tried to lunge at me, but the detectives dragged him backward. No, Dominique, please, he begged. They will kill me. You can't do this. I will sign anything. I will disappear. Just give me the money. I turned my back on him. The conversation was over. I turned my attention to Jasmine. She was still sitting on the floor, surrounded by the ruins of her reputation. Ethan was standing over her, holding the red binder. The police officer approached her. He wasn't gentle. He pulled her up by her arm. Jasmine Sterling, he said, reading from a card. You are under arrest for embezzlement, corporate theft, and tax fraud. Jasmine looked at me, her eyes wide and wet. Dom, she wailed. I am your sister. You called the police on your own sister. I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had tutored. The woman I had protected. The woman who had slept with my husband and my pastor and plotted to steal my fortune. I didn't call the police, Jasmine, I said, pointing to Ethan. The CEO of the company you robbed called the police. I just provided the venue. Ethan stepped forward. He looked at Jasmine with eyes that were completely dead. You stole $200,000 from the firm, Jasmine, he said. You falsified invoices. You forged my signature. That isn't a family dispute. That is a felony. But I am pregnant. Jasmine screamed, clutching her belly as the officer snapped the handcuffs on her wrists. I am pregnant with a holy child. You can't put a pregnant woman in jail? The officer shrugged. We have a medical wing, ma'am, and I doubt the judge is going to consider extorting a pastor to be holy behavior. They began to drag her away. She was screaming my name, begging for forgiveness, begging for me to make it stop. I watched her go. I felt a pang of sadness, not for her but for the sister I thought I had. That sister died a long time ago. This woman was just a stranger who shared my last name. And then there was the final piece of the puzzle. My mother. Bernice had watched the entire scene from the floor where she had collapsed. She had watched her son-in-law be arrested. She had watched her daughter be handcuffed. She had watched her pastor be beaten by his wife. The stress was finally too much for her fragile heart, or perhaps her fragile ego. She let out a gasp, clutching her chest. Her face turned a sickly shade of gray. Her breathing became ragged and shallow. My chest. She gasped, reaching out a hand toward me. Dominique. My chest? Help me. The crowd parted around her. Someone shouted, Call 911. I stood over her. I looked down at the woman who had told me to accept my husband's affair. The woman who had told me I was selfish for not giving up my home. The woman who had valued appearances over her own daughter's dignity. She looked small now. All her pomp and circumstance stripped away. Dominique. She wheezed, tears leaking from her eyes. I am your mother. Don't let me die here. I pulled out my phone. I dialed 911. I need an ambulance at the Drake Hotel, I said calmly. A woman is experiencing chest pains. Yes, she is conscious. I hung up. I looked at my mother. The ambulance is coming, I said. Bernice grabbed the hem of my dress. Her grip was weak. Come with me, she begged. I can't go alone. People will talk. Please, Dominique. Ride with me. I looked at her hand on my silk dress. I reached down and gently but firmly peeled her fingers off. I can't do that, Mother, I said. Why? She whispered. Because I am not your guardian, I said. You have insurance. You have the church, and you have the truth. I think that is enough company for one day. But I am your mother, she sobbed. And I was your daughter, I replied. But you made it very clear that family is about who serves you best. Jasmine served your vanity. Tyrell served your image. I just paid the bills. Well, the bank is closed, Mother. I stood up. The paramedics rushed into the room carrying a stretcher. They pushed past me, surrounding Bernice. Ma'am, can you hear me? One of them asked. She nodded, weeping uncontrollably, pointing at me. That is my daughter. She will come with me. The paramedic looked up at me, expectantly. Are you riding with us, ma'am? I shook my head. No, I said. I am not family. I am just the host. Send the bill to Greater Grace Tabernacle. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard the chaos continuing. Tyrell screaming threats. Jasmine wailing, my mother crying out for mercy. The press shouting questions. Miss Sterling over here. How do you feel? Do you have a comment? I stopped at the doors of the ballroom. I turned to the sea of cameras. The flashbulbs popped, illuminating my face. I didn't hide. I didn't look sad. I looked straight into the lens. My comment is simple, I said. The appraisal is complete. The forgeries have been discarded. What remains is authentic. I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped out into the lobby. The winter air rushed in to meet me, but it didn't feel cold. It felt clean. I walked through the lobby, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble floor. I didn't look back at the ballroom. I didn't look back at the wreckage. I walked out the front doors of the hotel and signaled for the valet. My car, please, I said. He looked at me, eyes wide, having probably heard the commotion inside. Right away, Miss Sterling. Are you okay? I looked at the gray sky. I looked at the frozen city. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that finally felt like it belonged to me. I smiled. A real smile. I am better than okay, I said. I am free. And as I drove away, leaving the sirens and the scandal in my rearview mirror, I knew that the best revenge wasn't destroying them. It was living a life where they no longer existed. I had paid a high price for my freedom, but looking at the empty passenger seat beside me, I knew it was a bargain. The Sterling betrayal was over. The Dominique era had just begun. 3 months is a long time in the world of high society gossip. In Chicago, the scandal of the Sterling baby shower had burned white-hot for weeks, consuming the front pages of the tabloids and the whispers of the country club locker rooms. But fire eventually runs out of oxygen, and what is left is just ash. I did not stay to sweep up the ash. I left that to the lawyers. I was sitting at a small round table at Café de Flore in Paris, watching the spring rain wash the cobblestones of Saint-Germain. The coffee was strong. The croissant was buttery. And for the first time in my adult life, my phone was silent. I had changed my number. Only 3 people had the new one: my lawyer Evelyn Vance, my private investigator Marcus, and the man sitting across from me. Ethan looked different. The shadows under his eyes were gone, replaced by a calm resilience. He was sketching on a napkin, drafting lines for a new library he was designing in Lyon. He had sold his firm in Chicago, wanting to leave the city that reminded him of Jasmine. We were not lovers. We were not even dating. We were something more durable than that. We were veterans of the same war. We were survivors who had crawled out of the same wreckage and found solace in the silence of the aftermath. He looked up from his sketch and slid a tablet across the table to me. Marcus sent the update, Ethan said, his voice neutral. I looked at the screen. It was a photo taken from a distance, grainy and dark. It showed a man limping out of a pawn shop in a run-down neighborhood in Detroit. He was using a crutch. His right leg was in a dirty plaster cast. He looked thin, gaunt, and terrified. He kept looking over his shoulder as if the devil himself was chasing him. It was Tyrell. The loan sharks caught up with him, I asked. taking a sip of my espresso. Ethan nodded. 2 weeks ago, they broke his tibia. Marcus says it was a warning. He still owes $400,000. He is living in a basement apartment working off the books as a dishwasher. He has no passport, so he can't leave the country. He has trapped Dominique, spending every day looking at the door waiting for Tony to come back for the other leg. I looked at the photo. I looked at the man who had worn my Rolex and slept in my silk sheets. I felt nothing. No joy, no sadness. Just the indifference you feel when you read about a stranger's misfortune in the newspaper. He wanted a life without me, I said, handing the tablet back. Now he has it. And Jasmine? Ethan asked quietly. I sighed, looking out at the rain. Jasmine's fate was more complicated, and in a twisted way more poetic. She gave birth last week, I said. A baby boy. In the infirmary of the Cook County Jail, she is awaiting trial for federal embezzlement and tax fraud. With the evidence you provided, she is looking at 5 to 7 years. Ethan winced slightly. He still had a heart. He still remembered the woman he thought he was going to marry. And the baby, he asked? What happens to the baby? This was the part of the story that proved God had a sense of humor, or perhaps a sense of irony. You won't believe it, I said. Pastor Jenkins' wife, Sister Margaret. She petitioned the court for emergency custody. Ethan's jaw dropped. Margaret, the woman who beat her husband with a purse. The same, I said. She told the judge that, since her husband was the biological father, she had standing. She claimed that the child was innocent of the parents' sins. She has the money and the reputation to provide a good home. But why? Ethan asked. Why would she want to raise the child of her husband's mistress? I smiled a small cold smile. Because she didn't divorce Pastor Jenkins, I said. She stayed with him, but she stripped him of his power. She controls the church finances now. She controls his schedule. And by bringing that baby into their home, she ensures that every single day for the rest of his life, Pastor Jenkins has to look at his sin. He has to raise the proof of his adultery. He has to change its diapers and feed it, and explain to the congregation why this child looks exactly like him. Ethan let out a low whistle. That is biblical punishment, he said. It is perfection. I agreed. Jasmine is in prison. Tyrell is broken. Jenkins is enslaved by his own wife. And the baby? The baby will grow up wealthy and loved by a woman who knows exactly how to keep a leash on a man. I finished my coffee. Come on, I said, standing up and smoothing my trench coat. We have an appointment where Ethan asked, packing up his sketch. The auction house, I said. There is something I need to buy. We took a taxi to the Sotheby's on Rue du Faubourg. The room was filled with the quiet, intense energy of serious money. I wasn't here as an appraiser today. I was here as a collector. We sat in the back. I held my paddle number 405 tightly in my lap. The auctioneer, a man with a clipped British accent, announced the final lot. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the highlight of the afternoon. Lot number 52. The Enigma. A rare carbonado diamond. 55 carats. Also known as a black diamond. A hush fell over the room as the velvet curtain was pulled back. There it sat on a rotating pedestal. It wasn't sparkling with the desperate, flashy brilliance of a white diamond. It was dark, opaque, and absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. It was forged in high pressure deep within the earth. It was the hardest substance known to man. It was indestructible. It reminded me of myself. Bidding starts at €2 million, the auctioneer said. I raised my paddle. 2 million. 2.2 from the gentleman on the phone. 2.5, I said, without hesitation. Ethan looked at me. 3 million, the auctioneer called out. I looked at the stone. It was heavy. It was solid. It had survived millions of years of pressure to get here. 4 million, I said clearly. The room gasped. It was well above the estimate. Going once, going twice. Sold to the lady in the back for €4 million. The gavel struck the wood. The sound echoed the finality of the last 3 months. An hour later, I walked out of the auction house with a small velvet box in my hand. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds over the sun. Ethan walked beside me. So, what are you going to do with it? He asked. Put it in a safe. I stopped on the Pontesard Bridge. I opened the box. The black diamond sat in a heavy platinum setting. It was a ring. I took it out. Tyrell bought me a ring with my own money, I said, holding the diamond up to the light. It was a symbol of ownership. He marked his territory. I slid the heavy black ring onto the ring finger of my right hand. It fit perfectly. This, I said, admiring the dark stone. This is a symbol of sovereignty. I belonged to me. Ethan smiled. He wrapped an arm around my shoulder. It was a warm, brotherly weight. You look good, Dom, he said. You look free. I am free, I said. I looked at the water flowing beneath the bridge. I thought about my mother Bernice. I had sent her a card last week. No return address. Just a note that said, I hope you find peace. I didn't hate her anymore. Hate requires energy, and I had better things to do with my energy. I looked at Ethan. You know they say blood is thicker than water, I said. Ethan nodded. That is what they say. They are wrong, I said. Blood is just biology. It is an accident of birth. But water. Water cleanses. Water flows. And the people who stand by you when you are drowning, the people who pull you out of the flood, that is your family. I touched the black diamond on my finger. I lost a sister, I said. But I gained a brother. Ethan squeezed my shoulder. And I gained a sister, he said. A scary, terrifying, brilliant sister. We laughed. It was a real laugh, loud and unburdened. I looked into the camera lens of my mind, addressing the millions of women who had followed my story, who had commented on my posts, who had shared their own stories of betrayal and resilience. So that is my story. I was the scapegoat. I was the bank account. I was the fool. Until I decided to stop playing their game and start running my own. If you are watching this and you feel trapped by obligation, if you feel like you are setting yourself on fire to keep others warm because they share your last name, stop, blow out the match, walk away from the fire. You are not defined by the people who hurt you. You are defined by what you do after the smoke clears. I am Dominique Sterling. I am single. I am wealthy. And I am finally honestly happy. I turned to Ethan. Come on, I said. I heard there is a great jazz club in Montmartre. I feel like celebrating. Ethan offered me his arm. After you, Miss Sterling. We walked across the bridge into the golden light of the Paris afternoon, leaving the shadows behind us forever, because in the end, that is the only family that matters. The most dangerous lie we are taught is that family is an unconditional obligation. My journey proved that toxic loyalty is simply a cage with a different name. For years, I tried to purchase their love with my silence and success, but I learned that you cannot buy integrity from people who are morally bankrupt. True freedom begins the moment you stop fearing the label of the villain in their distorted narrative and choose to be the hero of your own reality. Blood may connect us biologically, but only loyalty, respect, and unwavering truth define a family worth keeping. If this story inspired you to reclaim your power, thanks for watching. Take care. Good luck.